What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another amazing Naruto story. What if Naruto unlocked a dark, mysterious power that changed everything? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The Sandaime Hokage sat in a chair at the head of two long tables. Along the table to his right were arrayed the shinobi half of Konoha's council. To his left were the civilians. To the right, each face was composed, except Nara Shikaku's, which was asleep. To the left, most of the faces were enraged. "This is an outrage," sputtered the tall, portly civilian who stood in his place to the left. He had been speaking for the past 5 minutes, basically repeating the same points over and over. Firstly, that he had been foully burgled. Secondly, that there had been traps laid for him. Thirdly, that he was a citizen of Konoha, after all, and demanded some security. Fourthly, that the brat had gone too far this time, and fifthly, that said brat should be executed for the crime of, apparently, existing. The remainder of the civilians were not particularly happy, either. Perhaps half of them bore the signs of having recently and hurriedly cleaned themselves off, including the indignant merchant who was standing, the owner, the Hokage recalled, of a moderately large bakery. As the loudmouthed man finished at long last, several other civilians spoke up, telling similar stories, less the burglary. It seemed that, early this morning, the owners or employees of many village retail institutions, notably, the Hokage noticed with remarkable grumpiness, those convenient to Uzumaki Naruto's route from his apartment to the academy and back, had entered their places of business to find crude trip string traps linked, somehow, to storage seals containing large amounts of flour. The bakery owner had found a similar trap. Then, after, the Hokage surmised, sputtering in rage for at least half an hour and repeatedly skirting the edges of his law regarding the Jinchuriki, discovered that half his latest shipment of flour, 4 barrels in all, was missing. It was now assumed that this was the source of the flour in the traps. After hearing the civilians out, and shutting several of them up with killing intent when they came too close to the word demon, the Hokage turned to the ninja side of the council. Have any similar traps been found on clan lands? No traps were laid on Aburame land. Aburame Shibi was unreadable as usual. No traps were laid on Akamichi land. Akamichi Shuza did not seem too concerned. Shuza poked at Shikaku, who was next to him. No traps were laid on Nara land. He went back to sleep. No traps were laid on Yamanaka land. Yamanaka Inoichi seemed almost amused. No traps were laid on Inazuka land. There was no almost about Inazuka Sun's amusement. A single trap was laid at the gate to the Hyuga compound. It was triggered by Hyuga Makoto-san, who was able to avoid its payload almost entirely. The perpetrator was apparently unable or disinclined to penetrate the compound. Hyuga Hiyashi tried for the usual Hyuga impassiveness, but some annoyance leaked through. The Hokage was unable to discern whether this was occasioned by the prank or Hiyashi's constitutional objection to the civilian council shouting about things. And I have the previous report of its caretakers that a single trap was laid at the Uchiha clan compound. Thank you. Is anyone claiming damages from the traps alone? There was a clamor from the civilian side of the council, which the Hokage quieted after perhaps 30 seconds. I will clarify. Are there any claims of damages from the traps alone, that amount to more than an hour's cleaning work? It is not the village's or the council's duty to compensate civilians for such trivial expenses. The Hokage was rather annoyed, and focused a bit of his annoyance on the noisemakers. The silence that followed was grudging, but silent nonetheless. Very well. Since it appears that none of the traps caused noticeable damages, we will close that matter there. Tsukuda Kutra, the annoyed bakery owner who had been venting earlier, stood up. You have sustained damages equal to half of 1 weekly shipment of flour, correct? That amount, plus the expense of rush ordering another shipment, Hokage-sama. Very well. You will submit a bill of expenses to the Hokage's office, and you will be compensated in full. Are you satisfied? No, by Kami, I'm not satisfied. What about the brat? He can't get away with this. You are remarkably quick to assume the guilt of Uzumaki Naruto, Kutra-san. Though it was probably a decent assumption even without the Hokage's insider knowledge of what Naruto had been studying in the archives the past 2 years. The perpetrator will be found, and punished accordingly. This punishment does not concern you. You are being compensated. Are you satisfied? The man grumbled for a moment before replying. I am satisfied. Thank you. Now, that matter is closed. Are there any motions to bring before this special session? A man on the civilian side stood up. I move that, on the authority of the council, Uzumaki Naruto be put to death for the security of Konohagakure. The Hokage sighed deeply. The motion is heard. Votes will be taken in favor, opposed, or abstain. Civilian Council, vote. Predictably enough, the vote on the Civilian Council was overwhelmingly in favor. The Hokage noted a few carefully hidden smirks on the faces of the few who voted opposed. He spoke again once the vote had finished. The vote is logged. Shinobi Council, vote. Clan Aburame, opposed. Clan Akamichi, opposed. Shikaku did not even have to be poked awake this time. Clan Nara, opposed. Clan Yamanaka, opposed. Clan Inuzuka, opposed. Clan Hyuga, opposed. The Hokage gave Hiashi a sharp look. These motions usually gained his favor, which he returned without acknowledgement. Proxy vote for Clan Uchiha is in the hands of the Hokage. Clan Uchiha, opposed. The motion passes the Civilian Council. The motion fails the Shinobi Council. The motion is vetoed by the Hokage. The motion fails. The Sandaime side. The Hokage dismisses this special session on his own authority. Disperse. The shinobi all stood, nearly as one, and shunned away. The civilians made their way out the door opposite the Hokage in a more conventional fashion, and the Hokage sat wearily in his chair for another minute, then left. Uzumaki Naruto walked into the academy, where there was an uproar. He would guess that few of his classmates had been up and about sufficiently early to actually see it, but the sight of perhaps 25 bleached white civilian merchants running frantically back home from their shops to wash off had gotten into the rumor mill with glee. As he walked into the classroom, a wave of, if not silence, less noise swept out away from his point of entry, those students who noticed his entrance and had inferred his responsibility becoming silent on seeing him. He ignored it, walking straight to his seat and sitting down. He noticed with some satisfaction that the stuck-up bastard was not yet present, probably still cleaning himself off. Hinata, sitting next to him, blushed slightly at his approach. "Ah, Naruto-kun?" He turned to her. "Yes, Hinata-chan? Did you make the flower traps?" He grinned at her. "Now, Hinata-chan, would I do something like that?" She looked down, but she was smiling, and there was almost a giggle in her next words. "You should not do such things, Naruto-kun." Makoto-san was very angry. "Well, I'm very sorry that Hyuga Makoto-san is angry, and I'm sure the person who laid all those traps did a very bad thing." Naruto smiled at her. The conversation, so far, had fallen under the cloak of all the other conversations happening at the same time. Now all conversation stopped as Iruka-sensei opened the door and walked into the room. He stopped at his desk and began speaking. "Class, be silent." This was mostly a formality, as the class was silent already. "I have instructions to tell the students the following. An incident occurred this morning involving, the gates of the Hyuga and Uchiha estates, and the doors, front hallways, and bathroom doors of multiple civilian retail establishments throughout the village. The named locations were trapped with rudimentary fuinjutsu flower traps, presumably set up last night. A hunt for the perpetrator is currently ongoing." Several people looked at Naruto, and the majority who did not were clearly exerting heroic willpower to avoid it. "That is all the information available. Thank you. We are now going to begin our lesson," he said with a fulminating glance at Naruto, with a re-examination of the class proficiency in the Henge no Jutsu. "Please line up at the front of the class." Several students gave Naruto mild glares at this, which he ignored. Everyone filed up to the front and lined up. It was at this point that Uchiha Sasuke walked in the door. His appearance was not rumpled in the least, for which Naruto had to give him credit, but he gave Naruto a nasty look as he took his place at the end of the line. Quiet repetitions of "henge" filled the classroom as they filed up one by one to complete the jutsu. Naruto basically ignored the other students until it became his turn. He stepped forwards, the form he wanted held in his mind, henge. The smoke cleared. Iruka, his face suddenly twitching, was looking at a transformation that was, indeed, a perfect copy of him, except that he was wearing white pajamas embroidered with bright pink rabbits. Naruto as Iruka grinned. "So, sensei, do I pass?" Iruka twitched several more times before replying. Naruto wasn't sure whether he was holding back amusement or annoyance, But if he had read Iruka correctly before, it would be amusement. Iruka's deadpan reply seemed to confirm it. I'll mark your henge as proficient, and your ability to respect a teacher as needs work, he said. Get back to your seat already. Naruto released the transformation and walked back. Naruto walked into the Hokage's office, his movements painful. Maybe that trap on the Uchiha compound hadn't been such a good idea after all. Sasuke Teme had beaten him bloody in taijutsu practice that day. He might almost believe that he had touched a nerve. Ah, well, he would have to console himself with the thought that he could easily have replaced the flower in the trap with a few kunai or an explosive tag. There was more to being a ninja than the ability to punch people efficiently. The old man was sitting behind his desk, writing something. He looked up as Naruto walked in. Hello, Naruto. Thank you for coming. Naruto grinned. Hi, Oji-san. The Hokage smiled at Naruto and gestured him to sit. Now, we need to talk about all those flower traps. Naruto burst out in mock indignation. Hey, how do you know it was me who set those? The Hokage sighed. Did you? Well, yes, but I'm offended that you would assume I did. Your offense is noted and completely ignored. Now, back to the traps. Have you been going further than I gave you permission to? Trap seals are past that. You shouldn't be able to do anything with a seal without activating it yourself. Naruto smirked broadly at the memory. Oh, yeah? No, I haven't been reading ahead. What I did was I used this old and kinda broken storage seal, and I wrote it on 2 different pieces of paper. And then when someone hit the tripwire it yanked them apart, so the seal just got really broken, and that old broken storage seal makes all its stuff like explode out if it's broken without chakra activating. So yeah, the Hokage smiled. Interesting, I would not have expected that. So, you haven't been going too far ahead, which is good. There's still the matter of the flower you stole. Naruto sighed. Oji-san, the guy's an asshole. The Hokage nodded. I'm aware of that. I've been dealing with him in council all morning, thanks to you. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Sorry, Oji-san. Asshole or not, Naruto, there are strict laws regarding ninjas victimizing civilians. I can keep you away from those because you're not technically a ninja yet. I wouldn't if I didn't know you were deliberately targeting people who treated you shabbily. But in any event, I've guaranteed compensation from the village to the man who owns that bakery. In punishment for theft, Uzumaki Naruto, I am fining you by the amount which the village will pay in compensation. This payment will come in the form of half your living stipend and mission payments from now until the debt is paid. Naruto groaned. Oji-san. The Hokage smiled. Off the record, Naruto, I think it was quite a well-conceived prank, and shows impressive knowledge of Fuinjutsu. However, if you're going to break laws, you have to be prepared to serve the consequence. Dismissed. Naruto got to his feet reluctantly. Hi, Oji-san. The Hokage waved him out. Goodbye, Naruto. Naruto sat in the academy classroom next to Hinata, sweating. It was the day of the final exam, and Iruka had chosen the Bunshin no Jutsu for the technique to test on. Just my luck. The thing I've never practiced at all. Hinata was called first. She went off after quietly wishing him good luck. None of the people who were called came back, so he couldn't ask her how she had done. Drat. He fidgeted until he was called. Iruka-sensei and Mizuki-sensei were in the room alone. Iruka standing behind a table full of new Hite Ite, Mizuki beside him. Naruto walked up to the spot in front of the table. Iruka smiled. All right, Naruto, show me a Bunshin no Jutsu. You should be able to create at least 3 clones. Naruto gulped and concentrated. He formed the appropriate seals, then, concentrating chakra, he yelled, Bunshin no Jutsu. He felt a chakra drain and, panicking lest he not give it enough, pushed more chakra at the technique. There was a sudden release, but it felt warped, somehow. Naruto waited for the smoke to clear, only to see a single clone, looking like a slightly bleached zombie, lying beside him. He groaned. Iruka had raised an eyebrow. Really? Your henge was better than that. Unfortunately, Naruto, this does not satisfy the requirements. You fail. Naruto groaned more loudly and walked out of the room. Naruto sat on the swing outside, dejected. He had failed. His life was just going along perfectly well, and then this happened. Why did he have to fail? Hinata had come up to him earlier, correctly interpreting his saddened demeanor. She had offered him good wishes, hopes to see him again. It was kind of her. She had seemed almost as dejected by his failure as he was. She, of course, had passed, whether or not her actual fighting style would ever use anything so pedestrian as the Academy Jutsu. It would be the ultimate shame for any Hyuga to fail the Academy test. Naruto was sitting there, trying and failing to think coherently about what he would do next, when Mizuki-sensei approached him. "You shouldn't blame Iruka-sensei, you know," he said. "He's trying to ensure that you become stronger." "I don't," said Naruto, his voice muffled by his arms. "I know he couldn't have done anything different. It's just, I don't know what to do now." "Ah, that's hard," said Mizuki. "Having to stay back a year, not with your friends anymore, it would be a great pity." Naruto groaned. This seemed to be a common vocalization of his lately. "I know. I just can't figure it out. I wish I hadn't failed." Mizuki waited, just the right amount of time. "Well, you know." Naruto sat in a forest clearing, a huge, elaborate scroll sitting in front of him. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu had been difficult to learn, difficult, indeed, but he had done it. In only an hour, too. He sat back, nearly exhausted and panting, but with a wide grin on his face. He could graduate, now. He wouldn't need to skip a year, wouldn't need to fall behind. He could surprise Hinata-chan and make her smile. Fast approaching footsteps through the trees alerted him. Iruka-sensei jumped down from within them, landing on both feet in the clearing just ahead. Naruto grinned broadly at him, but there was something wrong. Iruka's face was tense, and he looked at Naruto almost coldly. "Naruto, what are you doing with that scroll?" "Nay, Iruka-sensei, that's the secondary graduation test, isn't it? I learned a jutsu. Now I get to graduate, right?" Iruka looked at him as if he had grown another head. "Where in Kami's name did you get that idea?" "Mizuki-sensei told me. He said that if I got this scroll and learned a jutsu out of it, I could graduate along with the other kids." That wasn't. Naruto stopped talking in reaction to Iruka's suddenly horrified face. "Naruto, get out of here. Mizuki tricked you. He's using you to steal the scroll. Run." Naruto, suddenly horrified, looked around in fear, but it was too late. A volley of kunai flew out of the trees, straight towards him. He was moving, but he couldn't move fast enough. The knives were going to hit him. Iruka ran at him and shoved him out of the way, taking the kunai himself. He was slammed back against the wall of the building behind, a kunai through his leg and another in his arm, breathing hard. Mizuki landed on a tree branch at the edge of the clearing. He was wearing 2 oversized shuriken on his back, and his face was twistedly triumphant. "Iruka, I didn't plan for you to find him. But," he grinned nastily, "you're weak. I can kill you right after I kill him." He pointed at Iruka, then Naruto with a kunai. Iruka looked up, chest heaving, still standing. "You call me weak. But what does it say about you if you're using academy students to do your stealing for you?" Mizuki scowled, a horrible expression. "Oh, I can recognize the thing's talents. Right before I do the village a favor by killing it. One last favor, won't it be nice?" Naruto looked up suddenly. Mizuki noticed. "Oh, the thing hears. Are you curious, brat? Curious why I call you that?" He grinned dementedly. "Curious why the whole village hates you? Curious why Iruka hates you?" Naruto whispered. "No." Mizuki did not hear. "I'll tell you. Do you know what happened on your birthday, brat? 12 years ago, the 9-tailed fox attacked this village. The Yondaime Hokage gave his life to defeat it, but he couldn't kill it, brat. He could only seal it. He sealed it into a child. You are the 9-tailed fox. You killed everyone 12 years ago. You killed Iruka's parents. They all hate you. Everyone hates you. Demon." Naruto stood up, slowly. No. Resolve shot through his mind. Mizuki had lied to him, had told him that he was the fox. No doubt Mizuki had not known that he already knew about the seal, so he was guilty of deliberately violating the Sandame's law. Most of all, Mizuki had hurt Iruka. He would die in pain. Naruto began to laugh. "Ha, you thought that would faze me?" Mizuki scowled and jumped down from the tree. "I don't care. Die, demon." He took the huge shuriken off his back and hefted it. Then threw it at Naruto. It turned from a static, 4-pointed blade to a spinning, flying disc of death. Naruto could see Iruka, off to the side, crouching, preparing to jump into the way, to take the blow. The shuriken spun towards him as Iruka flew over from the right, and Naruto simply stepped out of the way, knocking Iruka down and letting the shuriken fly harmlessly past into a tree. He laughed further. You call me demon? You think me demon? Then no a demon. He pulled a kunai from his holster, pulled one of his own homemade explosive tags out of a pocket, wrapped the note around the handle of the kunai. Then he clenched it in his teeth and crossed his fingers. Tajuu Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There was a burst of smoke that eclipsed the whole clearing. When it cleared, the clearing, the trees around, the roof of the building, were all covered in copies of Naruto. The only clear space was a small circle around Mizuki, who looked around frantically, suddenly absolutely horrified. Each clone was glaring at him with death in their eyes. And each clone still had a kunai with an explosive tag wrapped around the handle clenched in its teeth. The 20 or so clones closest to Mizuki activated their tags and threw them at Mizuki. He managed to jump out of the way in time, and a cloud of red glowing tags converged where he had been, then exploded hugely. Mizuki, still in the air, was a sitting target for the next 20 clones doing the same thing. This time, most of the kunai hit. Mizuki was wreathed in red for a moment before the tags exploded. A mangled body was catapulted out of the blast, Mizuki barely recognizable, his clothes burned through. Mizuki was almost certainly dead by this point, but that didn't stop the remainder of the clones. Each one threw their kunai straight at Mizuki's body. They hit as he topped his arc, 100 little red glowing motes congregating on him. Then they exploded. By some quirk of position, this explosion sent Mizuki down instead of up. His body, now completely unrecognizable, shot straight down from the sky and collided with the ground. The explosion, high above the forest, blew leaves off the trees. Then there was silence. The clones all dispersed, one by one. The original Naruto stood there, silent, staring at Mizuki's body. He was horrified. He had meant to kill Mizuki, but he hadn't intended such overkill. His voice, when it came, was almost, but not quite emotionless. Guess I went a little too hard, huh? Iruka, still sitting on the ground, gaped at him. Then Naruto noticed something. There, on the ground around Mizuki, was a loose grid of spidery lines. He looked around, beginning to panic. The lines. The horribly familiar lines. They were everywhere, they were coming back. Naruto crumpled, screaming, and clenched his eyes shut. The Hokage sat in a side room off his office, one with a bed in it. He couldn't imagine why there was a superfluous bedroom here, but it was useful. Naruto lay on the bed, his eyes closed. Iruka sat beside him on a different chair. Mizuki's body had been collected. The Hokage had seen it, before it was disposed of. Naruto was certainly powerful. He hoped the experience hadn't been too painful for the boy. Iruka had just finished his report of what had happened. He had had to knock Naruto out to carry him back here. Any attempt to move him while conscious had resulted in his struggling wildly to escape. The Hokage had brought him in here. He was the only one who knew how to deal with Naruto's Kyuubi-induced craziness. The Hokage turned to Naruto, still unconscious, and sighed. Time to try and help the boy. He reached out to his forehead, medical chakra flickering on his hand, and woke him up. Naruto's eyes opened. They flicked wildly around the room, and Naruto tensed up. Before he could move or scream, the Hokage had finished the seals. Kokwangyo no Jutsu. Naruto relaxed in the sudden darkness. The Hokage spoke. Naruto, can you hear me? It took a moment for him to reply. I hear you, Oji-san. What's happening? I placed you under a genjutsu to prevent you seeing things. You've been acting like you did that time 2 years ago. Iruka just got back from the forest with you. What's happening? Oji-san, they came back. I had just killed Mizuki and then the lines came back. A note of strain entered Naruto's voice talking about them, even without seeing. The Hokage made his voice as gentle as possible. It's all right, Naruto. You can't see them now. Try to remain calm. He paused for several breaths before continuing. I've heard what happened from Iruka. You don't need to talk about it. I'd like to ask you about the lines. All right? Naruto nodded, still lying on the bed, his eyes open, if unseeing. All right, I had just killed him, and his body fell down, and then I was looking at it. And I saw the lines again, and remembered. He shuddered, and I guess kinda went crazy. And then the next thing I remember is waking up here. The Hokage nodded, before remembering that Naruto couldn't see him. All right, Naruto. Iruka is here. I'm going to explain to him what's going on, and then I'll want to ask you something. All right? Okay, Oji-san. The Hokage turned to Iruka. This is related to something that happened to Naruto 2 years ago. You remember when he was absent? Iruka nodded. He was absent because he was ambushed by a couple of former Chunin in an alley and beaten really badly. And during his recovery, he started seeing some sort of manifestation, a grid of lines on everything, and later on he started to see things and people fall apart along the lines. It took some toll on his mind. The effect went away after he was recovered. We suspect it's related to the fox. Iruka nodded again, his face sober. So, those are the lines he's talking about? They are. We know it's not a genjutsu or anything. I had Kurenai in to check on him. We don't really know anything about the effect, but it happened when he was healing up from the worst he was ever injured in his life and when he had just used up a whole lot of chakra. Both times when you'd expect the fox's chakra to be active in him. And, there's something else. He turned to Naruto and spoke. Naruto, something happened 2 years ago. You had just gone crazy, and you were able to cut up a side table with a kunai. Do you remember? Naruto nodded. Yeah, I do. That kind of convinced me it wasn't a dream, when I woke up the day afterwards and saw it still cut up. What about it? Naruto, I'm going to take the genjutsu off you now. If you start seeing anything break I can put it back on you, but I want to check something. Okay? Naruto hesitated before nodding. Okay, go ahead. The Hokage broke the technique, and Naruto's eyes moved again with purpose. He sat up. What did you want to check? Can you still see lines? Naruto looked around. Yeah, it's a little fainter. Like I can't see them on something until I really look. But yeah, he took a deep breath. Do you remember what you did when you broke the table 2 years ago? Yeah, I was trying to stab the line. I don't know what I thought it would have done, but the kunai just kind of traced along it, and the table broke. Same thing happened with the legs. The Hokage handed Naruto a kunai which he took from his own holster. Then he cast about for something to test it on. Iruka, would you mind standing? I'd like to use the chair. Not at all, Hokage-sama. Iruka stood, and the Hokage reached over to his chair and handed it to Naruto. I want you to do the same thing that you did 2 years ago with the desk. Just trace the lines on the chair. See what happens. Naruto took the chair and set it on its legs in front of him. Peering at it closely, he frowned and placed his kunai on the edge of the seat, then traced it along the top to the other side. The Hokage could clearly see that he wasn't pressing hard enough even to scratch the paint. Then, without warning, as Naruto reached the other side of the seat and removed the knife, the chair split in 2 pieces along the line Naruto had traced. His eyes widened as the pieces fell over, no longer stable with only 2 legs apiece. He picked up the front half of the chair and tried again, this time tracing along the seat between the 2 legs. The piece broke again, and the half that Naruto wasn't holding fell to the ground. Looking fascinated down at the fragment, Naruto cut diagonally along the leg, and it, too, broke, showing a wide stripe of unpainted wood. Then he cut it again. Then again. The Hokage caught Naruto's hand before he could bisect the chair leg any further. I think that's enough. Naruto jerked suddenly, then relaxed, dropping the kunai. Sorry, Oji-san, can you put the darkness back now? It's a little bit weird. The Hokage nodded and repeated the genjutsu. Well, this is very interesting. Naruto, I think that the lines should go away soon, as your chakra builds up again and pushes out the foxes. We can just wait the rest of the night. You should sleep, if you can. Naruto nodded and lay back on the bed. All right, Oji-san. The Hokage looked at Iruka, and they exchanged a nod. It was some 5 hours later that Naruto woke up. He opened his eyes to find that the old man had cancelled the darkness genjutsu sometime during the night. Early morning light shone through the window, and Naruto jumped out of bed, suddenly energized. The room was empty when he woke, but as he got up he heard movement outside the door, and a moment later Iruka-sensei walked in. He grinned brightly as he saw Naruto. Hey, Naruto. Sit there and close your eyes. He indicated a spot on the floor. Naruto sat, and closed his eyes as ordered. There was a sound as Iruka knelt on the floor in front of him, and he felt something pulling on his forehead, then a tension around his head. Iruka fiddled with something at the back of his head for a moment, then pulled away. You can open your eyes now. Naruto opened his eyes. Iruka, still grinning, sat before him. I, Amino Iruka, as the teacher of Uzumaki Naruto and in consultation with the Sandaime Hokage, do now declare that Uzumaki Naruto has successfully graduated the Ninja Academy." Naruto groped blindly at his forehead for a moment and felt a familiarly engraved plate of metal. He grinned hugely, barely refraining from whooping with delight, as he jumped on Iruka and hugged him. After receiving his Hite-Ite, Naruto was sufficiently euphoric to run out and start doing missions that day. However, as the Hokage explained, that was not, yet, an option. Naruto walked into the room. It was one of the academy classrooms, but not one that Naruto had ever frequented. Two-person desks filled the room in tiers. He was not late, but the majority of his class had already arrived. Hinata was sitting at a desk next to someone else, whose name he did not know. He stopped beside her desk and grinned at her. "Hey, Hinata-chan." Hinata looked quickly up at him, as if startled. She must have been really distracted. Normally, even without her eyes, she could see most of the things around her. Her eyes flicked first to his face, then to the Hite-Ite around his forehead. "Naruto-kun, you graduated?" She smiled brightly, making him feel suddenly almost as absurdly happy again as when he had gotten the Hite-Ite from Iruka-sensei. "Yeah, some stuff happened," and here his smile faltered for a moment. "Last night, which I can't really explain, but it worked out with me getting a merit promotion. So yeah." He grinned broadly again, casting around for a seat. The one next to Hinata-chan was already taken, so he sat down in the nearest empty one. Which, he noticed only as he sat down, put him next to Sasuke Teme. "Great." Sasuke turned and looked at him levelly as he sat, but there was no particular malice in the gaze, and in only a moment he turned back to staring at nothing in particular. Naruto hmphed quietly at being ignored, and settled firmly into ignoring the Uchiha in turn. There was a clatter from the door at the rear of the room, and the sounds of loud female argument. Naruto did not turn around. He recognized the voices of Sakura and whatever her name was who always fought with her, both of whom he disliked, Sakura in particular for hitting him when he tried to ask her out once a year ago, and the other just on principle for her ardent and painfully obviously unrequited pursuit of her Sasuke-kun. He ignored them, too, until Sakura stormed up beside him and demanded that he move, so that she could sit beside, oh joy, her Sasuke-kun. "What?" said Naruto, looking up, rather confused. "No, I'm sitting here. Find somewhere else." He turned back to looking forward, expecting the matter to be finished, and so was startled and annoyed when Sakura grabbed him by the wrist and dragged him out of the chair, dropping him behind it. Sakura was about to sit down in the chair she had just yanked him out of, when the other girl, the blonde, moved up and disputed her right to it. Sakura brushed her off, claiming first come, first served. At this, one of the other girls who already had a seat, who had begun to pay attention when Sakura had knocked him out of the chair, stood up and claimed seniority over Sakura. This set off a wave of other fangirls vacating their seats and disputing who had entered the room first. Many of them had, indeed, come in before Naruto, which set him to wondering why they hadn't just sat beside their precious Uchiha when the seat was empty. The dispute was approaching the point where it might very well have erupted into physical combat when Naruto stood up. He was still behind the desk, standing between the mob of fangirls and the Uchiha, whose level stare at nothing had become distinctly annoyed and long-suffering. "Oi," said Naruto, very loudly. This preempted several volleys in the war of the fangirls, and they all became silent and stared at him. Naruto illustrated his words with large, pointed gestures as he spoke. Said he, pointing at himself, "I'm going to sit here." He indicated the chair that was the object of contention. "The reason for this is that I actually sat here. So, all of you, kindly, buzz off." He sat down and pointedly stared ahead. The fangirls were, for a moment, shocked silent. Then Sakura growled in anger and again grabbed at Naruto's wrist to deprive him of the seat. She was just about to yank him off the chair again when he broke her grip, causing her to reel backwards for a moment before regaining her balance. Things might have gone badly for Naruto at that point, being at the focus of the ire of the fangirlish mob, if Iruka had not at that moment walked in the door. He saw almost a third of the class congregated around a single desk, and loudly cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he shouted, his head seeming to grow by a factor of 3 or so. Naruto had never figured out if that was some sort of genjutsu or merely a psychological effect of being screamed at by Iruka. The group of girls turned towards him. Will this group of new ninja, now legally adults and considered capable of acting maturely in most situations, please sit down, said Iruka. The fangirls dispersed, some grumbling quietly. Sakura made a pointed sniff and moved off to take one of the closest seats to Sasuke, which had actually been occupied by another of the fangirls. That girl disputed the seat for only a moment before finding a different one. Iruka smiled without a trace of his earlier menace. Thank you. He then launched into an explanation of the system of teams, most of which seemed designed to, having stoked the egos of the new genin with their shiny new Hite Ite, cut them back down to size for their participation in the world of real ninja. Naruto tuned most of it out. One could not read any of the village history that he had read in the Konoha archives without both the relatively lowly status of genin and the structure of their teams becoming obvious. The lecture ended with Iruka's preparation to list off the teams themselves. Naruto perked up and began to pay attention. No one he knew was on any of the first 6 teams called. Then, Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto groaned quietly to himself. The Teme and the annoying fangirl. Well, at least Sasuke Teme was an effective ninja. Hopefully no one would expect them to fight anything for a while. He had kind of hoped to be on a team with Hinata-chan, but he supposed that they could still get together and spar or something. Hinata-chan was hard. Even though she wasn't nearly as strong as he was, when she turned on her eyes he just couldn't hit her unless he got a lucky shot. He couldn't think of a better way to get faster. And speaking of which, Team 8. Hyuga Hinata, Inuzuka Kiba, Aburame Shino. Naruto knew the Kiba kid for that dog which he always carried around on his head, and the Shino kid for, basically, being very tall and a little bit weird. He hoped they were good teammates for Hinata. Naruto sighed. The last team to be chosen had left with their sensei almost 15 minutes ago, leaving him, the Teme and the fangirl alone in the room. Naruto had become bored and started pacing 5 minutes ago, and Sakura had, much to the Uchiha's quietly expressed annoyance, taken the opportunity to steal the seat next to him. Sasuke sat in the same position that he had held, without change, for most of the class. He basically ignored Sakura's sitting next to him and sneaking glances at him, and completely ignored Naruto's pacing and muttering. After a good hour of this, Naruto was quite thoroughly annoyed, as well as bored. Weren't the Junin senseis supposed to be good role models? Why was he being so late? With a snort of annoyance, Naruto came to a decision. He hunted up a sheet of paper in the desk at the front of the room, then grabbed the canister of mostly spent chalk from the floor below the blackboard at the front and sat down at a desk. He removed a brush and ink, the basic sealing kit, from his pockets and began to sketch the same obsolete storage seal that he had used in the flower traps. When the seal was done, he dumped the canister of chalk onto it and sealed it inside with an application of chakra. Then he set the seal at the top of the door frame, standing on a chair to do so, and attached it to both the frame and the door so that the door would tear it apart if it opened. The others had been watching this work, being the most interesting thing happening in the classroom. Sakura was taken aback by the sealing and did not comment, though she evidently wished to. Sasuke turned to look at the sealed paper stuck through the top of the doorframe. A Junin isn't going to fall for that trick, Fuin Dobi. Naruto grinned brightly. Well, you never know. Sakura decided at this point to step in. Idiot, you're laying a trap for our sensei. You're going to get in trouble. Naruto rolled his eyes. He's late, it's annoying. Even if he doesn't fall for it, it may be entertaining to watch. Sakura was about to continue the debate when they heard a footstep outside the door. All 3 genin quieted and turned to look. A hand in a blue, fingerless glove pushed the door open. The seal tore in 2, and there was a minor explosion. Chalk dust filtered down from above, and there was a momentary rain of used-up chalk ends. A white-haired man walked into the room through the now dispersing cloud of chalk dust. Oddly enough, he didn't seem to get any of it on him. It would have been hard to tell if there was chalk in his hair, but one would assume that it would show up on his blue face mask. All 3 genin stared at him for a moment before he spoke. Well, I have to say that as a first impression, this leaves something to be desired. There was silence for a moment, and the Junin spoke again. Meet on the roof of this building in 5 minutes. Then, without ceremony, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The 3 genin sat on benches atop the academy building, while the white-haired, Masked man leaned against the railing around the edge. The Junin's face was unreadable, but he spoke in a mildly bored tone. So, why don't we introduce ourselves? Tell us your names, your hobbies, what you like and don't like, your goals. How about you, pink hair? Sakura bristled at the name. Shouldn't you introduce yourself first, sensei? The Junin nodded. Okay, my name is Hitaki Kakashi. I like some things, but there are things I dislike. I have some hobbies. My goals. He was quiet for a moment, then continued. Okay, pink hair, your turn. Sakura glared at him, but spoke anyway. My name is Haruno Sakura. I like. She blushed slightly and looked at Sasuke. I don't like loud-mouthed brats who can't keep quiet. This with a glare at Naruto. My hobbies. She blushed again and looked at Sasuke. Goals. I suppose I want a family someday. This with another glance at Sasuke. Kakashi nodded. Okay, your turn, rudimentary seal traps. Naruto grinned at the reference. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, Iruka-sensei, Hokage Oji-san, and the bit of the archive with the seals in it. I don't like. Here his enthusiasm flagged for a moment. Well, a lot of people are idiots. My hobbies are eating ramen and figuring out fun ways of using seals. My goal is to become Hokage. Kakashi raised one eyebrow, which was the only expression, Naruto thought, that anyone could actually read on his face, and nodded. Okay, staring at nothing. Go. Sasuke shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like, well, not many things. I dislike weakness, this with a glance at Sakura, who squeaked slightly, and tricks. This with a glance at Naruto, who glared at him. My hobby is training. My goal. My ambition is to revive my clan, and kill a certain person. At this, Naruto's glare turned to a mixture of interest and alarm. He stared at Sasuke for a moment, as if he would say something, but was cut off by Kakashi. Okay, well, at least you three aren't boring. So, we begin tomorrow, meeting at 5 a.m. at Training Ground 13. It's a training mission of sorts. Don't be late. And, he finished, standing up and turning around, don't eat breakfast. You'll just throw it up. Naruto showed up at the bridge leading to Training Ground number 13 at 5 precisely the next morning. This was quite a bit earlier than he was used to getting up. He had had to sleep early to make sure he wasn't tired for it. Sakura was already there, standing on the bridge, and after only a few minutes Sasuke Teme showed up as well. Then, of course, Kakashi didn't show up. They had waited for almost an hour before Naruto lost patience. Don't be late? Don't be late, he says. What's he doing telling us not to be late? Naruto growled, pacing back and forth on the bridge. We weren't late. He's late. Why's he late? Sakura was also annoyed, though she managed to refrain from fidgeting. If he doesn't show up then I won't get the chance to prove how strong I am to Sasuke-kun. She muttered, almost to herself. Sasuke's comment about weakness the day before had nettled her. Naruto lost what remained of his patience after another hour. The sun had risen some time ago. Sakura sat still with a growing look of annoyance on her face, while Sasuke Teme just stood, apparently not noticing the passage of time. Naruto got out his sealing brush and ink and started drawing on the wood of the bridge. Rudimentary seal traps. I'll show him rudimentary seal traps, he muttered angrily as he worked. Behind him, and unnoticed, Sasuke turned to look at him, staring rather intently at the matrix of seals that he was constructing. Naruto finished the seal, which looked like another storage seal, then pulled a flash bomb from the pocket where he kept random ninja tools. A tiny seal, just a single symbol, went on the flash bomb, and Naruto pushed it into the storage seal with a flash of chakra. Then he took up a position further down the bridge, across from Sasuke, and drew another seal on the rail near his hand. He looked up for a moment. Sasuke, Sakura, when I set this off you might want to close your eyes. I'm going to do it as soon as I see Kakashi-sensei stepping onto the bridge. Sasuke looked at him with more interest than Naruto had ever seen him show. What does it do? Naruto grinned. It's a self-triggering storage seal. The basis for a lot of trap seals. You can launch something out of it like an explosive tag or a flash bomb and it'll set it off for you. But Hokage Oji-san won't let me do trap seals yet, this with a near pout, so I have to set it off myself. Sasuke looked at him more intently for a moment, then shook his head. Fuin Dobi. Naruto rolled his eyes and stood, fidgeting, next to the trigger seal on the rail. He managed to stand, ready to trigger the trap, for 2 more hours, probably a record for Naruto standing still. Eventually, however, he also became bored and sat. It was half an hour more after that when Kakashi, oblivious to Naruto's careful work in preparing the trap for him, appeared on the wrong side of the bridge, with a bright, "Good morning." "You're late," yelled Sakura and Naruto, almost in unison. The 3 genin moved off the bridge to stand in front of Kakashi. Kakashi made precisely no apology for his tardiness, but held up a pair of bells on a string. "All right, so, the first thing I should tell you is that this is, actually, the final test to become genin. If you fail this, you go back to the academy. Okay?" This was met with disbelief from Sakura. "So what was the point of that final exam?" she grumbled. "Ah, that selects the students who are capable of becoming genin. This selects the student who will become genin. So here's the test. You are going to try and attack me. What you are trying to do is take these bells." He shook the 2 bells back and forth, and they jingled cheerily, "from here." He tied the string to his belt. "If you have a bell before noon, measured when the sun gets to there," he indicated an arbitrary point in the sky, "then you get lunch. Anyone who doesn't have a bell doesn't get any food. Oh, and they had to go back to the academy." Kakashi's expression was unreadable, of course, but his voice was gleeful. "Any questions?" Sakura spoke first. "But sensei, there are only 2 bells, and 3 of us." "How observant of you, Sakura. I guess one of you has a problem, then." There was a momentary, heavy silence before Sasuke spoke. "Sensei, are we to fight all out?" Kakashi nodded. "Believe me, you'll need to. Don't hold back on my account." Naruto raised a hand. "Ah, sensei. Last time I fought all out. I didn't really like what happened," he said, his voice uncomfortable. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. It might even have been both eyebrows, but the one was hidden under his hite. "Ah, Toji Mizuki, wasn't it?" Naruto nodded. "You don't need to worry about that. Fight as hard as you like. I won't be caught so easily." Naruto nodded in vague relief. Sakura and Sasuke both had been looking at Naruto oddly during this exchange. Before they could ask any questions, Kakashi cut them off. "Any more questions? No? Good. The exercise begins in 3, 2, 1, and now." He jumped away from them, landing in the middle of the clearing off the bridge. Naruto stood and shook himself. "All right," he said, and charged at Kakashi. As he charged, he formed a familiar cross-hand seal. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he yelled, and 10 clones appeared next to him, charging as well. Kakashi found himself under assault by all 11 bodies. It was no contest. He moved more quickly than Naruto had ever seen, blocking every blow aimed at him and dispersing the clones right and left. None of them even came close to the bells on his belt. When Naruto himself attacked, going for the bells rather than any hits on Kakashi, he found himself flying backwards from a particularly hard blow to the forehead. He landed and skidded along the ground, panting. Then stood. "All right, let's turn it up a notch. Toju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." This time, some 30 clones formed. Half of them charged, while half held back. The half that charged went straight after the bell just like the previous wave, and met a similar lack of success. The half that held back were loading kunai with explosive tags. As Kakashi cut through the first wave of clones with casual ease, the second wave all threw exploding kunai straight at him. Kakashi, not surprised, jumped straight up, letting the exploding kunai land where he was and destroy the remaining assault clones. None of the clones had any kunai ready to attack Kakashi while he was a sitting target in midair, and Naruto cursed himself for not making more. Kakashi landed unmolested and began taking out clones. Predictably enough, none of them could touch him. He plowed straight through the group of them before he came to Naruto himself. This time, Naruto drew a kunai himself and stabbed at Kakashi with it. He blocked the stroke aside with the armor plate on one glove, then turned the overextended arm into a brutal over-the-shoulder throw that left Naruto upside down against a tree. "Good. You've gotten lesson 1, fight to kill. You can take the bells off my corpse," said Kakashi loudly. "Or you could, if you could actually kill me." Naruto, disoriented from the sudden flip and near concussion, fell over sideways, groaning. Sasuke and Sakura had disappeared from the bridge long since. It was at this point that Sasuke came out from cover and attacked Kakashi, hoping that his taijutsu, well superior to the Dobi's, anyway, could succeed where Naruto's clones had failed. Unfortunately, that hope was dashed. Kakashi was too fast. Sasuke managed to avoid any knockout blows like the ones dealt Naruto, but he couldn't get close to the bells. After 2 minutes of straight assault, he had gotten one good shot at them, and had missed. Giving taijutsu up as a bad job, Sasuke jumped back and made a series of seals. Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu, he muttered, inhaling, and shot a huge fireball out of his mouth at Kakashi. Naruto, having recovered from his disorientation while Sasuke was fighting, sat up and watched, mouth open. Wow, he muttered, I have so got to learn that. The fireball cleared away, leaving a circle of charred, scorched earth. Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. Sasuke looked around, scowling but somewhat panicky. He swiveled around quickly, staring to both sides, above, and then turning again to cover his back. Where is he? He muttered. He stood still for too long. A hand came up out of the ground where he stood, grabbing his ankle. Sasuke panicked for a moment, trying to break the grip, but failed. Then, somehow, it managed to drag him down into the ground? What? Sasuke's head stuck out of the middle of a bare patch of earth as Kakashi rose from the ground as if it were liquid. He crouched in front of Sasuke's apparently disembodied head. In case you missed it, said Kakashi, dry as dust, I was below you. Naruto, completely recovered by this time, started laughing uproariously. Impressive, Teme, he yelled, getting to his feet. Sasuke, luckily for his remaining dignity, was facing sufficiently near Naruto that he could focus on him. Like you did any better, Dobi, he shouted, annoyed. Kakashi stood and faced Naruto as he approached. Sorry, Sasuke Teme, said Naruto, getting over his laughter. It was impressive. It's just also really funny. Sasuke scowled at him. Naruto stood straighter, and grinned. Now I'll show you how it's done. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. With a much greater puff of smoke, clones of Naruto surrounded Kakashi and Sasuke's head to 3 ranks deep. Each clone began preparing an explosive tag on a kunai. Kakashi, knowing what was about to happen, jumped over the group of Narutos to land outside the rain, leaving Sasuke out of the line of fire. Unfortunately, this left him close to several clones, who immediately threw glowing kunai at him. He jumped again, as quickly as he could, and dodged the first volley. Then the second rank of clones threw at him. 100 kunai converged on him, each glowing with the light of an explosive tag, just as the first volley exploded below him. Kakashi quickly made a single seal. When the smoke of the second explosion cleared, a badly charred chunk of log fell to the ground. Clones fanned out, looking for Kakashi. Several approached the bridge over which one arrived at the training ground from the rest of Konoha. Naruto still stood in the rain, approximately where he had been. Kakashi appeared over the bridge, dropping down out of a tree. 2 bells still dangled from his belt where they had been. He walked slowly towards the bridge, as if daring the clones near its other end to attack. A clone shouted, and soon most of the original big mob of them was gathering around the end of the bridge. The original Naruto pushed through the mob to the head of it. Hey, Kakashi-sensei, had enough yet? Kakashi laughed dryly. Are you going to stand there talking, or are you going to take a bell? Naruto was on the bridge by now. He glanced around, looking for anything he could use to his advantage, then saw it. He had to stall some more. Hey, why aren't you attacking? You're only outnumbered 50 to 1. Kakashi rolled his one visible eye. You can only taunt someone without sounding ridiculous if you have even the slightest chance of beating them. With that, he charged. Naruto moved forwards and to the side, several of his clones moving up to fill the gap. Just as Kakashi reached the bridge, Naruto slapped the rail in a burst of chakra and shouted, "Go!" The sealed trap Naruto had laid that morning, forgotten when Kakashi had apparently bypassed it, set off. The specialized storage seal spat a single flash bomb up to eye level, where it detonated. Kakashi's one eye widened, barely, as he saw it, then it went off. A wave of clones rushed forwards to attack. They crossed the bridge in seconds, then milled around on the other side. Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. A clone at the rear of the group yelled a warning. Only a few of the clones managed to turn in time to see Kakashi finishing a group of seals, then slamming one hand into the ground. The earth leapt up in a wave to his command, and that wave swept towards the bridge and the mob of clones. As it hit them, they either dissipated immediately or were thrown into the air to dissipate on landing. The wave stopped as it hit the river. Only the few clones on the bridge itself survived. Kakashi hit them just as hard as he had before. None of the clones survived, or even got near him. Naruto himself was the target of another long throw, back away from the bridge towards Sasuke. He landed, skidded, fell. Kakashi walked up to him. "Wow, you almost made me work there. Okay, enough of you. Let's see if Sakura can get a bell. Maybe she's worth making genin." He disappeared in a sudden cloud of smoke. Naruto stood up, slowly. His body hurt all over. Being repeatedly slammed around by a Junin could, apparently, be considered harmful. He glanced around, checking to see if Kakashi was still around and planning to throw him through pieces of the landscape again, but saw nothing, until he froze, almost panicking, at the sight of countless thin lines on everything in sight. Crap, 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 crap. It's happening again, damn it. He hyperventilated for a moment, then made a valiant effort to calm down. This is not the time to panic, my promotion is riding on this. He looked around, forcing himself to keep calm at the sight of more of the lines. Hokage Oji-san said that they were related to the fox's chakra, and I just made like 300 clones and got beat up by Kakashi-sensei. That must be it. Just ignore them, that's the ticket. He looked around again, this time forcing himself to ignore the lines and concentrate on what he saw. Still no Kakashi. Sasuke's head stuck out of the ground, facing away from him. It must have driven the boy mad to hear what had been going on behind him without being able to see it. Naruto brooded about the test for a moment. This is annoying. They can't possibly actually make being able to beat a Junin a condition of becoming genin. That'd just be dumb. He couldn't beat Kakashi at all. Hell, Kakashi hadn't even pulled out any high-level techniques until Naruto got the drop on him with a flash bomb in the presence of an army of his clones. Sasuke couldn't beat Kakashi either, and while Sasuke couldn't pull Naruto's one-man army trick, he certainly had more techniques. Naruto wouldn't be surprised if Sasuke could beat him even with all his clones, if he had anything else like that fireball. I can't beat him. Sasuke can't beat him. There's no way in hell Sakura could beat him. What's his game? It couldn't just be an impossible test. There was no way they'd let Junin senseis pull that on their respective teams. Suddenly an idea came to Naruto, without any real logic behind it. He decided to run with it. Jogging around Sasuke's head, Naruto made the cross hand sign. 4 clones materialized behind him. Hey, Sasuke Teme. Hey, Dobi. I assume from Kakashi's monologue that you didn't get it that time either? Yeah, I've come to a bit of a realization. What's that? It's impossible. What? Look at it. I couldn't beat him. You couldn't beat him. I surprised him with that sealed trap I set this morning, and all I got out of it was some really huge class earth jutsu and getting thrown across the field again. Why? I don't know, but I figure I'll get you out of there, just on general principles of frustrating Kakashi-sensei's intent. Naruto and his clones dispersed around Sasuke, digging with kunai. The process was annoying and the tools not ideal. Several of the clones' kunai dispelled on hitting a rock or something, making it go more slowly. Relatively soon, however, they got Sasuke's arms free, and he then cooperated in freeing his legs. Naruto dispelled the rest of his clones with a bit of relief as their chakra poured back into his system. Usually he didn't get tired, but this was a little taxing even for him. Sasuke scrambled out of the newly made hole in the ground, brushing dirt off his clothes. Naruto looked at him and laughed weakly, earning a mild glare. It's not that funny, Dobi. Naruto finished laughing and shook his head. It's not that, but I bet Kakashi-sensei was planning on pulling you out of there with an earth jutsu later on. And it probably would have left you just as clean as he was after he finished, hiding underground. Sasuke grumbled, thrice cursed over clever teachers. He looked up. Did you have a plan other than going back to what we were doing? Not really. But I've kinda been in the archives all the time since 2 years ago, and they tell you all about these teams, right? Like it looks like the team you were on as a genin is really important later on. They kind of stay together until some of them die, or whatever. And they always talk about teams of 3. There's no teams of 2 anywhere, unless someone on the team died or went rogue. Yeah, okay, So he's probably not going to fail only a few of us and keep the others. Yeah, I bet that whatever this test is, we either pass it or don't as a team. So I guess there's no harm in working together on it, if we're not fighting each other. Why would that do any better than what we've been doing? He's a Junin. Well, what if you were to henge into me? Then I could make another bunch of clones, and while he's taking them all out you do that fireball thing again. He wouldn't expect it, might not dodge in time, especially if some clones hold on to him. Sasuke looked at him with mild surprise. That's a good idea, actually. He looked around. The question is, where is he? He said something about Sakura, where's she? Naruto shrugged. I don't know. Easy enough to find. He focused his chakra, more difficult than usual, and formed a cross-hand sign. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A mob of clones appeared around him and immediately scattered. Naruto staggered suddenly and sat down hurriedly. All right, that might have been a little much. He shook his head muzzily. He had used quite a bit of chakra there, especially given that he hadn't gotten any of the last mob's chakra back, because Kakashi had destroyed them all. He waited a moment for his head to clear, then stood up, breathing rather more heavily than usual. Now I guess we should just wait until one of them comes back. Sasuke nodded. Hey, Dobi, what is that technique? It's not a regular clone, obviously. It's called shadow clones. Physical clones that dispel after they get hit hard. It takes a buttload of chakra, though. Sasuke looked at him rather bemusedly and said nothing. Naruto, still tired, felt no particular urge to continue the conversation. He looked around, seeing nothing out of the ordinary, but noticed that with the latest large expenditure of chakra the lines had grown more distinct. There were none on the ground, which was almost a pity, as it would have made it quite a bit easier to dig Sasuke out, but they covered the trees, the rocks, they were all over the bridge. Naruto closed his eyes momentarily and took a mental step back. Ignore them, don't freak out. Then, suddenly, he shook his head and cursed. Kami, damn it, Kakashi-sensei is an asshole. Sasuke looked up. Not that I disagree, but what brought this on? He saw one of my clones and just dispelled it. Kind of painfully. He's this way, said Naruto, moving off at a jog in one direction. Sasuke followed. Did you see Sakura? He's got her in some kind of genjutsu. At least I assume that's what it is, since she's just sitting there looking horrified while Kakashi stands in front of her. Sasuke grunted as they continued on. A moment later, they crossed the boundary into the forest proper, and Naruto jumped up into the trees. Sasuke followed. After perhaps a minute, they stopped. We're almost there, said Naruto. You'd best transform into me now, so we don't lose surprise. Sasuke nodded and made a quick gesture, transforming into a perfect copy of Naruto. Naruto was inclined to laugh at first. Sasuke as Naruto looked at him and gave a very Sasuke-like supercilious look. Keep going, Dobi. Naruto suppressed his laughs as they moved again. It was only another few hundred feet to the edge of the clearing in which Sakura sat, caught in her genjutsu, while Kakashi stood in front of her maintaining it. Naruto landed in the clearing, Sasuke behind him. Hey, sensei, I don't like being ignored. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Another mob of clones appeared, half in the clearing, half in the branches of the trees. Naruto himself fell into a squat, winded. The mob of clones, including Sasuke, charged forwards. Kakashi rolled his single visible eye and flashed at them. He began dispelling them, again, left and right, no clone able to get a shot on the bells at his waist. But unbeknownst to him, one clone in the mob was making hand signs. It happened suddenly. A flash of fire came from within the group of clones, and a huge, roaring ball of it came out to engulf Kakashi and the 6 clones he was currently engaging. All the clones immediately dispelled, but Sasuke had seen Kakashi right in their midst as the fireball destroyed them. He kept it up until he ran out of breath, and looked at the target. This one had made an actual crater. None of the clones nearby had survived. Kakashi was nowhere in sight, instead, a blackened log fell to the ground. Sasuke cursed. Again? Seriously? The henge had dispelled when he put as much chakra as he could into the fire jutsu, leaving him again looking like himself. He looked around frantically, unable to find Kakashi. The genjutsu on Sakura had broken when Kakashi was distracted by the next iteration attack of the clones. She looked around, confused, only to focus suddenly on Sasuke's fireball. Then, seeing his henge dispel, she smiled happily, only for the emotion to turn again to alarm. There, behind you. The voice was female. Sakura? Sasuke spun around, dodging to one side, barely avoiding a driving punch from Kakashi. Then it was himself versus Kakashi again. Sasuke barely holding out, now on the defensive. Then, suddenly, a clone of Naruto jumped out from behind Kakashi and grabbed him in an armlock, his legs locked around Kakashi's waist. Kakashi faltered, and Sasuke lunged forwards triumphantly, grabbing for the now exposed bells, when he suddenly felt a really odd twisting motion, as if he was being yanked up into the air, but without going upwards. Then, suddenly, the feeling resolved, and he was standing in the armlock of a Naruto clone, the clone hanging off his back. Unprepared for the sudden weight, Sasuke fell backwards, landing on the clone. Ow! Sasuke had expected it to simply dispel, but it hadn't. Its grip had slackened with the fall. Sasuke rolled off and looked at it. Naruto? Naruto lay there, rubbing at his nose. Okay, not a clone. Yeah? That hurt. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sorry, Dobi. Kakashi-sensei did a kawarimi again, and switched me into the hold. Naruto got up, still rubbing his nose. He addressed the white-haired Junin, who was standing right in front of them where Sasuke had been. You are really annoying, you know that? I work at it. Kakashi looked up at the sky, his voice an effect in no way indicating that he had just been exchanging blows. And time is up. Sorry, no bells for you. Meet me back at the starting position, all three of you. He disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sasuke stood. Damn it. He looked over at Sakura, who stood under the tree where she had been caught in Kakashi's genjutsu. Are you all right? Sakura blushed and nodded hesitantly. Naruto grumbled. Cursedly annoying sensei. Let's get going. We probably failed that. Sasuke nodded and followed Naruto out of the clearing, with Sakura hurrying to catch up. Kakashi sat on the ground, reading some sort of orange-covered book. He looked up as the three arrived, and stowed the book somewhere behind his back. Naruto wondered vaguely what it was, but that was the least of his worries as the three of them stood in a line in front of the Junin. Kakashi raised his one visible eyebrow. What could be seen of his expression was sardonic. How do you like the test? Naruto glared at him. You're annoying, sensei. Kakashi rose to his feet. All right, then. Naruto, you have a lot of chakra, but you should work on some more creative uses for it than try to beat people up with 50 clones. Sasuke, I was startled that you could do the fireball jutsu, but if I can dodge it easily it's not a good time to do it. You did better the second time. He turned to look at Sakura, whose eyes were downcast. Sakura, you did a good job of hiding at first, but you lost concentration on the task at hand. That's why I was able to catch you so easily in that genjutsu. Overall, you're decent fighters. There is definite room for improvement. Naruto looked at him. What's your point, sensei? We're just going back to the academy, right? Kakashi laughed sheepishly, one hand behind his head. Oh, yeah, maybe should have said that first. Team 7 passes, you're all genin now. Naruto's jaw dropped, and he looked at Kakashi murderously. What? Then what was all that crap with the bells for? Kakashi's visible eye wrinkled in what might have been a smile under the mask. The test was whether, even in a situation that seemed to require you to compete against each other, you could still work together. Naruto, Sasuke, you did well with that. You managed to surprise me with that fireball, Sasuke. Sakura, you warned your teammate about a threat to him, even though it might have led to him getting a bell instead of you. His face and effect became deadly serious. Sometimes the rules or the mission seem to conflict with your teammates. Your comrades. This is the question. What do you do when you are forced to fight your comrades, or abandon them? And this is the answer. Those who abandon the mission, or break the rules, are considered to be worthless. Trash. But those who abandon or betray their comrades are worse than trash. That is the lesson of this test. Naruto looked pensive for a moment, then nodded. Then, as the words sank in, a broad grin grew on his face. Hey, we graduated. Yes. Sasuke acknowledged the news with only a subtle grin, but it was a visible show of emotion that was not annoyance, which might as well have been a record. Sakura, of course, was looking at Sasuke, but she seemed happy as well. Kakashi made the eye gesture that might have indicated a grin under his mask. Team 7 will begin missions tomorrow. See you then. As Naruto walked proudly back to the village, he almost managed to ignore the fact that there were still black lines on everything he saw. Naruto burst into the mission room at the Hokage Tower, pushing close behind Kakashi. The old man sat there, in the middle of the table, Iruka-sensei beside him, both flanked by a few people Naruto didn't know. Sasuke Teme and Sakura followed behind him, with somewhat more dignity, but both were still visibly excited about their first mission. They lined up in a rank facing the table, Kakashi at one end. Hokage-sama, Team 7 ready for duty. The Hokage smiled slightly and picked up a sheet of paper from the tabletop in front of him. It was all Naruto could do to avoid loudly proclaiming his enthusiasm and anticipation. In pursuit of some remnant of dignity, he confined his excited ranting to his own thoughts. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. What do we get to do today? Will we get to fight someone? Wow. He almost missed the Hokage's reading off the sheet. Available missions for Team 7. Moving of heavy objects in warehouses of Sukudakutra. General services, including garden chores, babysitting, and grocery shopping, provided to the Shizuka family. Retrieval of the cat, Tora, belonging to the wife of the fire daimyo. Is there a preference? Naruto's face fell, and his fidgety demeanor shifted instantly to a crestfallen one. He opened his mouth to protest, but Sasuke, standing beside him, poked him in the ribs and preempted it. Sasuke's expression had also shifted, though less dramatically, from the almost grin he had previously worn to his usual annoyed flat affect. Kakashi, the Hokage, Iruka, and the only other person at the mission table wearing a Hite Ite were all watching the three genin with identical expressions of dark amusement. Kakashi selected one of the mission slips from the table. The cat, I believe. That should prove a challenge. The three dismayed genin turned and followed him out of the room. Team 7 walked back into the mission room, Naruto carrying a disgruntled and beribboned cat. All three of the genin had scratch marks on their arms and faces. Kakashi, of course, was untouched. Team 7, reporting mission complete, said Kakashi, stowing the little orange book behind his back. A woman who could only be described as precisely the sort of person who would attach ribbons to a perfectly healthy cat, then repeatedly hire ninjas to recover it when it ran away, was standing by the mission table. She rushed forward and grabbed the cat from Naruto. Oh, my sweet little Tora. Mommy was so worried about you. How could you worry mommy so? She said in an indescribably annoying, squeaky voice, hugging the cat tightly against her chest. The cat made a resigned meowing noise, fighting weakly for room to breathe. The genin, as if by previous accord, looked pointedly away. After several more such pointless eruptions, the woman paid the clerk who sat next to the Hokage at the table and walked out with her cruelly imprisoned cat. The genin looked at Kakashi, who rubbed the back of his head and grinned. It's up to the Junin sensei what we do in terms of missions. So, do any of you want to do another mission today? The three genin were unanimous in their immediate negative responses. All right, then. You're off on your own recognizance today. Meet again here tomorrow for missions. He disappeared in a cloud of smoke, apparently taking, on your own recognizance, seriously. Sasuke stared at the place where he had been for a moment, then shrugged and walked out. Naruto and Sakura followed. Sakura peeled off to destinations of her own once they left the building. Naruto was about to do the same, but Sasuke beckoned him along with him. Naruto, not actually having anything else to do, followed. Sasuke was silent until they reached one of the training grounds, one nearer in than the large one where they had their belt test, but still only little frequented. Then he turned to face Naruto. Both of them began speaking at once, then broke off. Naruto gestured for Sasuke to speak first. When you told Kakashi about how last time you fought all out you didn't like what happened, what were you talking about? Naruto sighed, glancing around. Wow, it couldn't be a nice simple question, he said. Then looked up at the sky. I'm not sure how much of it I can actually tell you, some of it might be village secrets. Leaving out anything specific, I was attacked by a traitor to the village. He had reason to believe from his previous experience that I was a worthless fighter. He came at me with intent to kill. I did the shadow clone jutsu and hit him with about 100 exploding tags. Same as I did against Kakashi, except this guy didn't kawari me out of it, he just got really badly mangled. It was kind of ugly. Sasuke raised an eyebrow. A traitor? What was he ranked? Chunin rank. He underestimated me. I probably couldn't have gotten him that badly if he'd been cautious from the start. I got lucky. Sasuke nodded. Naruto waited a moment before asking his own question. So, when you said when you introduced yourself, that you were going to kill a certain person, and it was in connection with your clan, did you mean who I thought you meant? Sasuke's face went bleak. I meant my older brother, yes. I see you've heard of him? Naruto nodded in return. Yeah, he paused for a long second. That's some ambition you've got there, Teme. It is. Sasuke's voice was flat, and he regarded the ground for a time. Then he looked up, his face losing the bleakness it had attained. I'd like to fight you. Naruto nodded. If you want. You want to set rules? Sasuke grinned. I thought at first we'd leave ninjutsu out of it. So no, pulling armies out of your back pocket, and I won't be shooting any fireballs at you. Naruto assumed a ready stance. You're probably going to win this one, then. You were always better than me at taijutsu. Sasuke dropped into his own stance. Let's see. Naruto walked back along the path from the training ground, exhilarated. Sasuke was good. Their early taijutsu matches had gone all his way, and while if he was allowed clones he could usually pull him down by force of numbers, it wasn't really a fair match. Neither of them could use their potentially deadly techniques, fireballs or explosive tags. The training ground Sasuke had chosen was quite a ways out from the village. Sasuke had gone off after their match to do something insufficiently specified, but whatever it was took him away from the village proper. That left Naruto walking back along the line of training fields on his own. The sun setting behind him, bathing the scene in a ruddy light and casting long shadows ahead of everything he saw. He saw a figure on the road ahead of him, moving more slowly than he, and as he approached he saw that it was familiar. He broke into a run. Hey, Hinata-chan, he said, coming up beside her and slowing down to her pace. She looked at him and smiled, blushing slightly, though it was difficult to see with her face in shadow. Hello, Naruto-kun. So, Hinata-chan, are you doing missions now? What's your team like? Who's your sensei? The questions came quickly, Naruto almost cutting himself off in his haste. She almost giggled at his distractible enthusiasm. We started missions yesterday. My team seems pleasant enough. Our sensei is someone named Kurenai. She's a genjutsu specialist. Naruto grinned. Cool. Hey, Hinata-chan. I was wondering if you'd like to get together tomorrow or something and work out a bit. Because I need to get faster at taijutsu, and you're the fastest person I've ever fought, and… He paused, for some reason reluctant to finish. Because it's fun to spend time with you. Instead, he just cut himself off. So yeah. Hinata ducked her head and blushed brighter. I guess I could do that. Naruto grinned. Thanks. How are your missions going? Hinata smiled. Well enough, I suppose. It's just little jobs, like moving things around or doing chores for people. Not difficult. Naruto made a mock pout. Yeah, we had to catch this cat. Who's kind of nasty, and we had to avoid hurting it at all, so it just scratched the heck out of us. He glanced down at his arm, where there had been a moderately nasty claw wound, but it was gone. Huh. Anyway, we did this teamwork exercise with Kakashi yesterday, so didn't do a mission then. And I just fought Sasuke. He's, like, really good, even better than I thought seeing him in the academy. He kind of beat me up. A look of concern crossed Hinata's face, and she opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. Naruto did not notice. That's one reason why I wanted to spar with you, because you're the only person I've ever seen who's faster than he is. Naruto grinned at her. Hinata ducked down, hunching her shoulders. I hope I can help you, Naruto-kun. She said. Naruto looked at her, hearing her sudden hesitation. Oh, it'll help a lot, Hinata-chan. I could never hit you in the academy, so I figure if I get fast enough to actually land a punch on you I'll be able to beat Sasuke Teme easy. Hinata gave him a tremulous smile. I hope so. He grinned. It'll be great. He looked up, noticing the sudden change in the light. The sun had set. Oh, drat. I've got to go, Hinata-chan. I wanted to meet someone, and they might leave soon. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Hinata nodded. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. Naruto grinned and ran ahead. The Hokage was filling out another sheet in the reams of paperwork that the office of Hokage required when the door opened. He looked up and saw Naruto walking into the room. Putting down his pencil, he smiled as the boy sat down. Hello, Naruto. What is it? Naruto grinned at him. Nay, Oji-san, I was wondering something. Could you teach me that darkness trick that you used on me when I was going crazy about the lines? The Hokage raised an eyebrow. I could. Is there a reason you want to learn it? Well, Naruto paused. I was using the shadow clones a lot when Kakashi tested us yesterday, used up a bunch of chakra, and started seeing the lines again. And this time I used up more, so I didn't stop seeing them before stuff started falling apart on me. He shivered but continued. If that's going to happen every time I use a lot of chakra, I can try to start dealing with the side effects on their own, but I'd like to be able to turn off my eyes if I need to. The Hokage nodded. Very well, then. I can teach you that. You should be able to learn it pretty quickly. I'll find a time when I can teach you, perhaps later this week. Naruto grinned brightly. Thanks, Oji-san. The Hokage smiled back at him. It's no problem, Naruto. Oh, and there's another thing I was going to tell you, which I might as well tell you now. Now that you're a genin, I'm giving you authorization to look at the level 3 sealing manuals. Naruto, already grinning, grinned wider, so much that the Hokage might have been afraid his head would split open. Hey, cool, I've been wanting those. Thanks a lot, Oji-san. The Hokage held up one finger. Ah, but one condition. The level 3 books have some instructions for, among other things, trap seals that can activate automatically when they sense a chakra signature nearby. You've caused enough havoc by jury-rigging hand-triggered seals. Before I let you look at the level 3 books, I want your promise that you won't use seals for any more pranks. That includes clever little traps for your sensei. All right? Naruto pouted. Oji-san. That makes it no fun. The Hokage suppressed a smile. Fun or no fun, that's the condition. There are laws against attacking people, Naruto, and using fuinjutsu in a trap looks a whole lot more like an attack than a harmless prank. I know you don't mean it that way, but it's something that the council can say, and they don't like you already. Which means that I have to deal with a bunch of idiots loudly clamoring for your head. So no more sealed traps. Got it? Naruto hung his head. Got it. Thanks for the level 3 authorization. Anyway, Oji-san. The Hokage nodded. You're welcome. And your promise? Naruto rolled his eyes. I promise not to use fuinjutsu in any pranks or traps laid for people who are not enemies to Konoha. All right? Perfectly. Thank you, Naruto. The Hokage smiled at him. Naruto grinned himself and walked out of the office. Naruto found Hinata at one of the training grounds the next day, right after their mandatory D-rank grunt work. He came up behind her and greeted her rather loudly, eliciting a jump and a squeak. Oh, hello, Naruto-kun. I didn't see you, I'm sorry. It's no problem, Hinata-chan. I was, kind of trying to surprise you. I shouldn't have been surprised, she mumbled as they walked over to the sparring ground. Naruto did not seem to hear her. Instead, they took up positions across from each other on one set of starting lines, and both bowed. Naruto took what seemed to be the usual academy position, while Hinata, for the first time in sparring with him, stood in the Jukin stance, activating her eyes as she did so. Naruto looked at her quizzically for a moment. Hinata-chan, what's that stance? I've never seen it before. She blushed, but did not break her stance to look away. This is the Jukin stance. It's for the Hyuga Taijutsu style. It's against the rules for me to use it in the academy, so people won't know too much about it, but I can use it now. Naruto grinned. Hey, cool, Jukin. Let's see. Without further discussion, he launched into one of the standard academy attack flows, aiming a straight punch at her face while prepared to follow up quickly after a block. Hinata, from her lower stance, brought one hand around in what looked like an oddly reversed standard block. However, her palm hitting his wrist, she pushed a small spike of chakra into it as she slapped it aside. Naruto quickly took a step back, shaking his hand. Wow, that's neat. I guess, he said, moving his hand around and individually flexing his fingers, that's a weak version of the chakra. He waved his hands around vaguely. Thing? 'Cause I read in the archive that Jukin strikes should more or less paralyze what they hit, and that was only a little bit worse than hitting my elbow wrong. Hinata nodded, returning to her ready stance. Yes. If I push too much chakra, it can do permanent damage, so when we spar it's just minor strikes. Is that a problem? No, no problem. I like having the use of my limbs. Naruto shot her a grin. Then he attacked again, this time feinting into a kick. She blocked, spiking his calf this time. He pulled back, massaging his leg, then advanced again. This time, instead of fainting or drawing back from the painful spikes, he swung twice, then simply jumped at her, leading with one shoulder. She was bowled off her feet, and they both ended up on the ground in a tangle of limbs. Naruto began to laugh. He took a moment to disentangle himself, then rolled off of her, pushing himself up, a little harder with the blows he had taken to the arms and setting up his tackle. Well, that's one way to get through that defense of yours. Hinata had been blushing vigorously throughout, but here she giggled slightly and met his eyes. Anyo. It would not be good to do that in a fight. If someone was trying to kill you they could have hit you in the back there. Naruto grinned. Figures. Ah, well, I'll figure something out. They sparred for some hours. By the end of it, Hinata was tired and pouring sweat. Naruto breathed heavily for a few moments after each exchange. Longer if she happened to have hit his lungs that time, but recovered quickly. When they finished, he was red-faced but seemed no less energetic than when they began. She stood back from the line, seeing the sunset. Anyo. I have to go, I'm sorry, she said, looking down. He grinned. No problem. You're really good, you know. That Jukin is great. You could beat Sasuke Teme easy. She smiled at him as she left, but she did not say what she was thinking. That with the Jukin, what he had described was no real achievement, and for a Hyuga, she was weak. So it went. Team 7 routinely did D-rank missions in the morning. Some were boring and routine, such as, apparently every other day, finding the fire daimyo's wife's cat. Others were more interesting. One day, they were called to clear a field of the tall, scrubby weeds that had grown on it. Sasuke had immediately sought permission from Kakashi to use fireballs on it, and on gaining it had taken great pleasure in scouring the entire area clean. That was one of their quicker missions. Several days after the Hokage had taught him the Kokwangyo no Jutsu, the darkness genjutsu that Naruto could use to turn off his eyes if he needed to, he sat in a training area, ready to try something. First, he created a mob of shadow clones. This time, instead of using them in concert to attack another, he simply had them all fight to the, well, dispersion, joining in fully himself. After some minutes of bright orange cacophony, the field was empty again, and Naruto was panting and bruised. Then, allowing himself no more than 30 seconds rest time, he did it again. Then again. It took 5 iterations of this before he was feeling as exhausted as he had after Kakashi's bell test, and that surprised him. I only made 3 mobs of that size when I fought Kakashi, and I was just about falling down. Am I getting stronger? Thin lines had manifested faintly on the surfaces of things after the 4th try, but after the 5th they were again dark and omnipresent, ominous in their potential. Naruto shivered slightly on seeing them, but suppressed the reaction and sat under a tree. He closed his eyes and shouted in his mind, "Hey, idiot fox, you want to tell me some things?" And a voice sounded in his mind, greater than his own, darkly amused. "Your wish is my command, whelp." And he felt his consciousness slipping away, and he fell over and slept. He woke in a dimly lit hallway, water on the ground. He was lying face down, but the water was only a fraction of an inch deep. It did not reach his mouth or nose, merely making him rather wet. As he stood, he looked around. A hole in the ceiling emitted oddly yellow light. There were cross passages every few feet, and the ceiling was covered in pipes whose purpose was not clear. A loud rumbling noise came from one direction, and a breath of air washed over him, smelling not quite foul, but fetid and odd. Where the hell am I? I was just trying to speak to the fox, and I wind up here? He looked around again. He had no idea where he was or where he should go. But the direction of that odd wind seemed as good as any. That at least implied that there was something at the end. He set off, down the main hallway, 3 passages down, and then turned. This side passage went on straight for only some tens of feet, then ended. It left him in a huge, high-ceilinged room whose floor was still covered in water. A huge gate, stretching across most of one wall and all the way from the floor to the ceiling, stood before him. Its 2 sides were, oddly enough, joined only by a piece of paper with the word, seal, written on it, as it would be used for certain types of prison seal that were only discussed in the abstract in any sources he had read. He approached the gate, it being the most interesting thing he had seen here so far. As he walked toward it, he felt another rush of air over him, stronger, this time, and stronger smelling. It accompanied a repetition of the earlier rumbling, but, this time, he could hear it better, and identified it as something very large, breathing. He froze, only then putting the pieces together, just as a huge pair of eyes appeared behind the gate over a wide, toothy grin. As he watched, the whole of it became shrouded in red fire, which burned heatlessly as it spoke. "Hello, whelp, you wanted to see me?" The words were laced with poisonous laughter. Naruto looked at it, frozen, and tried desperately to collect himself. "You're the fox." There was a sound of laughter, this time, but its humor was dark. Astute of you to have noticed. Naruto drew himself up, his annoyance warring with his fear. "Hey, I have some questions for you. Ask and you shall receive, whelp." Naruto stuttered, suddenly off balance, then spoke again. "What's with all these lines? Have I not already given you this answer? The lines are death. If you cut a thing along its lines, it will be cut. If you stab a thing in its points, it will be destroyed." "All right, but why am I seeing them?" "You see with my eyes, whelp. As I am trapped here, my power affects you." Naruto frowned. "All right. Wait, points? What are those?" The fox laughed again. "You do not see them? Simply wait, whelp." Naruto shook his head, confused, then tried again. "Why does it drive me crazy after a while? You think a human can see with a demon's eyes and suffer no ill effects? Be glad that you can use it for the little time you can, whelp." This time there was a long, dark laugh, sounding more truly amused at this than at anything before. The fox's laugh was frightening. Naruto stood up straight and attempted to shrug the effect off, but his voice was less brash. "That's great, now where am I and how do I get out?" The fox laughed again. "Oh, I will send you away, whelp. But hear this. You will require power or else you will die. My presence within you thrusts you onto a greater stage. Merely always know that without me you would be helpless." And again consciousness slipped away, and again he slept. Sakura debated with herself whether to proceed. She had decided to approach Kakashi after their mission that day, but now she was less sure of herself. For one thing, he had simply gone to an empty training ground after their mission and sat, reading a book with a bright orange cover. While this was convenient for her, it was most certainly not part of his daily routine. Had he anticipated her request that day? If so, it was accommodating of him to act so obligingly, but a little bit creepy that he could read her so well. She eventually realized that to avoid it would be futile. He had to be aware of her presence, simply standing lamely in the street near the training ground. If she left, he would simply know that she didn't have the courage to approach him, and how pathetic was that? Sasuke-kun, need to get stronger. Just think about that. With that, she stepped onto the training ground and walked toward him. He looked up at her when she approached and stowed the book behind his back. How was he storing all that? Whenever he got anything out, he just pulled it from behind him, as if someone was obligingly hiding in his kunai pouch and handing him things. Weird. Kakashi-sensei? Yes, Sakura? Sensei, I was wondering. What can you show me to make me stronger? Well, that depends. What are you good at? If I recall correctly your scores. Weak taijutsu, moderate chakra capacity, good chakra control. Is that right? She nodded hesitantly. Well, if you're good at chakra control, the things that immediately present themselves are genjutsu and medical training. Medic training usually waits until you're a chunin, but genjutsu. I can show you some genjutsu. Also, if you increase your capacity some, you can do some interesting things with standard jutsu. That'll just be training. She nodded again, somewhat more confidently. Genjutsu, then? He stood up. Let's begin. Naruto stood across from Sasuke at the training ground, in now familiar position. His afternoons after missions were basically evenly split between sparring with Sasuke and sparring with Hinata. The latter had made him significantly faster, requiring that he fully dodge blows due to the impossibility of conventionally blocking a Juken strike, while the former had, well, increased his tolerance for sarcasm. This was the third fight of the day. The first two had been plain taijutsu, and as usual, Sasuke had won both, though that was getting to take longer and longer. Now, Naruto grinned, because he was able now to use shadow clones. He formed a crossed hand seal and focused his chakra, this time eschewing the voiced repetition of the technique. A dozen clones formed around him, including him and the mob. They all charged in unison with a yell. Sasuke held his ground. He was used to this, by now. The first clone reached him, and he dispelled it with a single punch. The second, likewise, though this one got in a blow to his shoulder first. The third one was Naruto himself. He took a punch to the face, which hurt, and Sasuke turned away, thinking he was a clone who would dispel. This proved a mistake. Naruto jumped on him from behind, grabbing him in a full Nelson like he had Kakashi during the bell test. Sasuke, unfortunately, was not so adept with his Kawarimi as Kakashi was, and Naruto's grip prevented him from using hand seals. Sasuke took 3 blows to the face before he could dispel the attacking clone with a kick. Then he jumped up and backwards, landing hard on his back, or rather, on Naruto. Naruto yelped, his grip broken, and Sasuke scrambled up to deal with the rest of the clones. They were charging as Sasuke finished his hand seals. They were all but one caught in his fireball, a weakened version that would dispel clones but not severely injure Naruto himself. The remaining clone, who had been a few steps behind the others, charged through the smoke of their demise and jumped at Sasuke, yelling. Sasuke, who had paused for a moment to breathe after the chakra-intensive fireball technique, caught the first kick and threw an uncharacteristically sloppy counterpunch. The clone ducked under it and slammed a fist into the Uchiha's stomach. Sasuke folded around the blow, but retained the presence of mind to slam a vicious headbutt into the clone's own head, dispelling it. He straightened up slowly, one arm across his solar plexus, and saw Naruto, now standing, jump up. He looked up, tracking Naruto's motion, and caught the first downward kick on his other, upraised arm. Naruto, moving as if in slow motion, pulled his legs up as the support of Sasuke's arm failed, and, as he fell, brought one knee up into the other genin's face. He pulled the blow at the last moment, but there was still a startling crack. Naruto landed and jumped backwards, but Sasuke held up one hand in token of surrender as he pressed the other to his nose. As he removed it, Naruto saw his nose bent to one side, a trickle of blood running down. He winced. That looks nasty. You all right, Teme? Sasuke nodded, not speaking. He took one deep breath, through his mouth. Naruto saw, and moved his nose slowly back straight. To his credit, he remained silent throughout, though he clenched his teeth. He took a moment before speaking again, his voice oddly nasal. Nicely done, Dobi. Naruto grinned. You gonna have that looked at? Sasuke nodded. I guess so. Can't really fight like this, anyway. They walked off the field side by side, Naruto feeling a little bit smug about duplicating on the perpetually arrogant Uchiha the same sorts of wounds that he had taken in their taijutsu-only matches. Team 7 was, for a change of pace, looking for the fire daimyo's wife's cat. Again, Naruto had started using large numbers of clones to search for the dreaded beast, but a clone couldn't reliably catch the thing. It was vicious enough in its scratching that it could dispel a clone, and the attempt at capture would only stir it up. It was more useful to have them all search, than any that saw it dispelled to send the information back to him. Naruto still couldn't believe that he hadn't noticed that he received his shadow clone's memories until it was pointed out to him by the Uchiha. Even when he was beating him in a fight, Sasuke still managed to make him feel stupid. He received a burst of memory and sorted through it. There was the cat, and the clone had been there. Closer than usual to the tower. Perhaps the cat wanted to sample the leavings from village market stalls, rather than the available small wildlife in the wooded areas. He signaled his team, and they moved quickly in the direction of the cat. This is simply riveting, said Sasuke, his nose only now free of the tape it had borne for the past week, as they closed in on the feline. Naruto nodded in annoyed agreement. After a quick interlude involving some loud hissing, painful scratches and a face full of fur, the two continued their conversation on the way back to the tower with the cat now wrapped in a sack. I wonder if the C-rank missions are less pointless? Naruto sighed. I figure we can at least ask for one. It's been, what, a month? 30 of these things is more than enough for me. Sasuke looked at him with a raised eyebrow. Tomorrow, then? Naruto nodded as Sakura caught up to them. Tomorrow. Team 7 walked into the mission room, a scene that had already become very familiar. The Hokage sat at the table alongside Iruka, just as they had every day. It might have been the first day they had done it, or their fifth, or any of the other days. Nothing about this room ever changed. Naruto and Sasuke had spoken to Kakashi about receiving a C-rank mission. His reply had been entirely non-committal and unhelpful, which was pretty much standard for Kakashi. Naruto was sufficiently annoyed that he was ready to take it to the next level. The Hokage was reading off the available D-rank missions again. He finished the listing of tasks, and Kakashi was ready to select one when Naruto spoke. "Hey, Oji-san, those missions are all boring. Can we get a C rank instead?" Naruto had, in fact, heard of the concepts of dignity and proper respect. Indeed, he respected the Hokage probably most of all the people he knew. No one had managed to explain to him that such respect was usually expressed through formal means of address. Amusement and annoyance warred in the Hokage's mind over the rights to his facial expression, and he ruthlessly suppressed both. A request is logged from Uzumaki Naruto to assign Team 7 a C rank mission. "Is this the desire of Team 7? Sasuke spoke first. "It is my desire." Sakura nodded a moment afterwards, following Sasuke's lead. "Does the leader of Team 7 object?" The Hokage looked at Kakashi, who was standing in proper formation, but with a particular unfocused look in his visible eye. Kakashi started, then rubbed the back of his head almost sheepishly. "Well, if they want one, I don't have a problem." Kakashi looked at the genin, who looked back at him with expressions of eagerness, Naruto, slightly less apathy than usual, Sasuke, and mild nervousness, Sakura. He nodded. "Yeah, I guess that's fine." The Hokage nodded. "Very well. C-rank mission assigned to Team 7. He selected a different stack of papers from the table in front of him. "The mission is..." He pulled a slip from the stack and read from it, "to escort a civilian client to the Land of Waves, then remain there until the completion of a project, while protecting him and his associates from whatever dangers appear. Client is a bridge builder working on a bridge connecting the Land of Waves to the Land of Fire. Mission expected to last up to 3 months. Anticipated hazards include risk of banditry and wild animal attacks." He turned to the side, where a door was set in the wall with a chunin guarding it. "Please bring in the client." The chunin nodded sharply and walked through the sliding door. A moment later, he returned, followed by an old man. He wore an oddly shaped straw hat, and he held a bottle in one hand. The flush on his face implied that the contents of the bottle were rather strongly alcoholic. "Tazuna-san, your mission has been assigned to Team 7, said the Hokage, indicating them. The old man looked at them owlishly, his face red. These are just a bunch of kids. How can they be ninjas?" he said with a scowl. Naruto crossed his arms and looked at Tazuna with a glower. Sasuke's almost smile slid off his face. "Especially that one." Tazuna pointed. His hand was too unsteady to tell who he was pointing at, but his next words left no doubt. "The short one with the stupid coat. You're too short to be a ninja." He obviously found this hilarious. Naruto yelped in indignation and moved as if to charge at Tazuna. He was caught short by 2 hands. Kakashi grabbed the back of his coat, and Sasuke caught his wrist. Sasuke spoke out of the side of his mouth. "Dobi, if you kill the client we can't get paid for protecting him." Naruto grumped and stepped back. Kakashi and Sasuke released him. Kakashi stepped forwards. "Tazuna-san, I assure you that we are indeed ninjas. My team are genin, and they are certainly trained more than well enough to defeat any sort of bandits or animals that we might encounter. I am a Junin, and I am competent to handle any realistic threat." Tazuna took another pull at his bottle and hmphed. "I guess I get what I pay for. All right, when do we leave?" Kakashi glanced at his team. "Does anyone anticipate preparation taking longer than a few hours?" All 3 genin shook their heads. "Then we can leave this afternoon. Tazuna-san, please meet us at the East Gate at 3 o'clock. Our mission begins then." He turned to look at the 3 genin. Dismissed. Hinata was working on repairing a roof when she saw Naruto at a distance. She looked at him with a smile, seeing him grin in response, then burst into a cloud of smoke and disappear. "What?" She looked around, concerned. Her teammates, working beside her, looked up. "Hinata-san, is something wrong?" inquired Shino. No. I just saw something odd," she said, and began to work again. Some 5 minutes later, she was taking a break. She had just stepped down off the ladder onto the ground when Naruto, again, came up to her. "Hey, Hinata-chan." She smiled, still a little perturbed. "Hello, Naruto-kun. Anyo. Just a few minutes ago, were you on that roof over there?" She indicated the roof of the building on which Naruto had been. "Oh, yeah, that was a clone. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you, our team got a C-rank mission." Hokage Oji-san said that it might take like 3 months or something. So I'll probably be gone for a while, and I just wanted to say goodbye. She nodded to him, smiling. Congratulations, Naruto-kun. I hope it goes well. He grinned. Thanks. Well, I'll see you around, I guess. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. He waved and ran off. Hinata smiled after him, wondering. He would be gone, maybe for a long time, and what was that about a clone? Clones didn't do that. Naruto arrived at the meeting place perhaps 5 minutes late. Sasuke and Sakura were already standing at the edge of the square fronting the east gateway. More surprisingly, so was Kakashi. Naruto walked up to them and burst out at Kakashi, "Hey! Since when are you ever on time? Why is the one time you're on time the day I'm late? What's with that?" Kakashi smiled under his mask, his eye reflecting the expression. "Why, Naruto, I don't know what you're talking about. When have you ever known me to be less than perfectly punctual?" He looked down the road. "Hey, there's Tazuna-san." He walked towards the bridge builder, leaving Naruto fuming in his wake. Sasuke glanced at Naruto askance. "Hey, Dobi, you packed for 3 months there?" Sure enough, both Sasuke and Sakura were wearing large, heavy-looking travel packs, while Naruto wore only his usual training attire and weapon holsters, plus an extra, odd-looking pouch on each hip. Naruto glanced down. "Oh, yeah, I am. Storage seals." He grinned beatifically. "It makes things so much lighter, it's nice and convenient." This with a smug look at Sasuke's overlarge pack. Sasuke snorted. "Fuin Dobi." Kakashi walked up alongside Tazuna, cutting the conversation short. "All right, kids, let's go," he said, louder than usual. The genin glanced at each other, confused at the unaccustomed diminutive, until Sasuke raised one eyebrow and subtly indicated Tazuna, who was looking chagrined. A sense of understanding permeated Team 7. "Ah, he's messing with the client." They filed one by one out the small inset door in the large gate, Kakashi first, followed by Tazuna and the genin. Kakashi stopped at the booth in which sat the guarding Chunin. "Team 7, departing for C-ranked mission assigned by the Hokage," he said, handing a scroll to the guard. The Chunin looked bored, stamping it and handing it back. "Team 7, mission confirmed," he said. Kakashi continued on, and Tazuna and the 3 genin followed. They camped that night near a quick-flowing stream, about half a mile off the road. Kakashi had chosen the spot for its access to water, despite Naruto's noting that he was carrying at least a week's water in one of his several storage scrolls. That conversation had been rather amusing. "Naruto, this is a useful thing to know. How to support yourself on what you can carry without using storage seals. Most ninja are not going to be carrying 50,000 ryo worth of storage scrolls on every mission they go on." 50,000 ryo? Yes, Naruto. Storage scrolls are expensive. I'm assuming you made these? Yeah, but I didn't know. Not surprising. We will be selecting our campsites according to the usual needs of ninja who do not carry small fortunes in fuinjutsu on their persons. If Naruto had had any further objections, he had not expressed them, probably still trying to come to terms with the real value of his work. Team 7, along with Tazuna, sat around a small fire, made by Sakura under Kakashi's careful eye to release as little smoke as possible, eating field rations. The sun was just setting behind the trees to the west, as the genin wore identical distasteful expressions at the offensively bland rations. Naruto finished first and stood up. "I'm going to go walk around a little." Kakashi looked up. "Standard rule, stay within 50 feet of camp if you don't have good reason to leave that radius." Naruto looked slightly crestfallen, but nodded before he walked away. He turned around on reaching the 50-foot mark, and walked back across the allowed circle, turning slightly to avoid cutting through the camp. On reaching the 50-foot boundary again, he turned and paced in circles around it, restless. Meanwhile, the rest of the ninja were finishing their food. Naruto walked back up to the camp just as Sasuke was finishing. He looked up amusedly. "Do you think you got enough exercise in your walk?" Naruto grumped and sat down again. Soon darkness fell, and Tazuna retired to an extra tent. Kakashi stood up, stretching. "All right, my shiny genin, here's your next lesson. How to establish a watch schedule in potentially hostile territory. Of course, since it wouldn't be a lesson otherwise, I regretfully cannot help you, and as such I'm going to sleep now. Good night." He disappeared as well into his tent. The 3 genin looked at each other until Naruto spoke. "That was a lesson? Team 7 woke with the sun, except for Sasuke, who had taken the dawn watch. They ate a quick breakfast, consisting of more ration bars, while Tazuna slept. After the team was ready, Kakashi woke Tazuna and they tore down the tents. Kakashi admonished them to leave no trace of their presence behind, lest enemies determine their location. In pursuit of same, the genin combed the campsite for almost half an hour, policing the tiniest signs of their camp. Kakashi, of course, did nothing throughout. They began walking again with Kakashi cheerful and the genin more and more annoyed. "Kakashi-sensei, is you having a team an opportunity for you to teach us or for you to get us to do all your work?" Naruto grumbled as they left the campsite behind. Kakashi made the expression they had learned to recognize was a grin under the mask. "But Naruto, if I did it all for you, you wouldn't learn anything. I'm just trying to make you the best shinobi you can be." Naruto and Sasuke both rolled their eyes at this, and Sakura made an annoyed snort. The travelers were walking along a wide dirt track between occasional, sparse clumps of trees, first Naruto and Sasuke, then Tazuna and Sakura, and finally Kakashi in the rear. They walked mostly in silence, the shinobi watching the surroundings, Tazuna simply walking. The genin in the lead passed the puddle without notice or comment. Sakura, who was watching Tazuna, did so as well. Kakashi, playing rearguard, raised one eyebrow as he passed, then simply continued walking. Naruto first became aware of the enemies at a loud splashing noise and a sound almost like the chains that controlled the large gates at Konoha on their pulleys. He spun quickly around, Sasuke following suit, to see two apparitions in gas masks and wearing odd armored claws on their wrists. As he watched, a chain of odd links connected their clawed gauntlets, and it flew through the air to wrap several times around Kakashi. With a mutual yank, the two odd ninjas tightened the chain, and it ripped through Kakashi's body. Dismembered pieces fell to the ground. "First one," said one of the two ninjas flatly. They charged, straight past Sakura and Tazuna towards Naruto and Sasuke. The chain leapt into the air again, seeming to have a life of its own, seeking to wrap around the two genin at the same time. Naruto and Sasuke jumped in opposite directions. While still in the air, Sasuke threw a kunai at the chain, hitting it precisely and binding it to the tree trunk behind. Not for the first time, Naruto envied Sasuke's ability with the throwing weapons. Not so confident in himself, he landed before pulling two explosive kunai from the pouch behind him. The armored ninjas, who, Naruto noticed, were wearing headbands, though he could not identify the symbol at the moment, had just turned and noticed the binding of their chain when the kunai landed at their feet, tags wrapped around the handles and glowing ominously. They both ran, but the necessity of moving quickly prevented them from disengaging the chain from their gauntlets. Both enemies were still bound to the tree by their chain when the tags exploded. As the dust cleared, Sasuke charged through the cloud and attacked one of the two, jumping up to slam into him in a flying kick that left the ninja on his back, Sasuke standing on his shoulders. The genin landed a hard blow on the ninja's face above the mask, but was then forced to jump away and disengage to avoid the counterstroke of the armored claw. The other attacker had disengaged from his chain while Naruto watched Sasuke. He stood up from where he had fallen in his rush to escape the exploding tag, and turned slowly to look at Naruto with a menacing expression. The attempt at intimidation failed. Naruto formed a cross-hand seal and muttered under his breath, and 10 more of him popped into existence on either side. The clones charged, Naruto among them. The enemy's eyes widened, and he raised his clawed gauntlet in gesture of defiance, then fell over suddenly, unconscious. Naruto stopped, confused, then saw something he had not expected. Kakashi, standing behind the fallen enemy, having slammed the ring of a kunai into his temple. The Jonin nodded at Naruto before moving towards Sasuke and the other enemy. Naruto stared at the place where Kakashi had apparently fallen to the spiked chain, and saw only a sliced-up log. He smacked himself in the forehead in realization and ran towards the others as well. The other enemy was down, by this point, and Kakashi stood next to Sasuke behind him. Kakashi smiled at Naruto as he ran up. "Ah, good timing, Naruto. Would you happen to have any rope or wire in those scrolls of yours?" Naruto gaped for a moment before he regained his mental balance. Yeah, one sec." He pulled a scroll from one of his side holsters, glanced at its label, then put it back and grabbed another. This one, he opened to a certain seal, then triggered with one hand. 2 coils of ninja wire appeared atop the scroll. He handed one to Kakashi and sealed the other one back away. As Naruto stowed his scroll, Kakashi dragged both unconscious ninja to the foot of the tree where their chain was pinned, then tied them up tightly with the wire. Naruto looked up as he finished, to see Kakashi pull a book from the pouch behind him. Unusually enough, this book was not, in fact, bright orange. He opened it up and scanned through it, as if looking for something. Naruto took the time to look more closely at the 2 enemies. Their forehead protectors bore hidden mist insignia, but he could not deduce much else from their gear. Kakashi finished with the book and put it back in his belt pouch, which was apparently bigger on the inside. He glanced down at the 2, who were just starting to wake. Kakashi sped the process up by kneeling in front of them and slapping them both vigorously across the face. When both were marginally lucid, he stood up. The Demon Brothers, I see. Missing Nin of Kirigakure. What brings you here attacking random travelers? A voice sounded in Naruto's head, still impressive and intimidating, but this time annoyed and insulted rather than amused. Demon? They're no demons. What business have they with the name? Naruto flinched slightly, but attempted to maintain his concentration on Kakashi. Sasuke seemed to be thinking along similar lines. Demon Brothers? The image I associate with demon is hardly a couple of pathetic assassins with a gimmicky weapon. Kakashi spoke dryly. Nonetheless, that's their apparent alias. Care to answer my question? This was directed at the brothers in question, along with a threatening eyebrow. One of the brothers spoke up. We got told by, and he looked nervously at his partner, we got hired to take out the old guy. Tazuna and Sakura had walked over by now. Sakura was looking frightened, but also a little disappointed. She was shooting more glances than usual at Sasuke, who was unaware, his attention on the captives. Tazuna had come up just in time to hear the Mist Ninja's admission, and he was looking rather pale. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. You're hiding something. His voice was almost disappointed. Told by whom? The brother who had spoken looked panicked. We got hired. We can't tell you, we can't. Whatever would happen to you is going to be the least of your worries. Kakashi shook his head. Lucky you, we don't have time right now to arrange a proper interrogation. Unlucky you, that means the Anbu get to take you back to Ibiki. He ran a finger along the edge of the brothers' fighting chain, then made seals. Kachiyose no jutsu. He slapped a hand down on the dirt path. There was a cloud of smoke and suddenly there sat a small pug dog. Hello, Kakashi. What is it now? Naruto looked back and forth between the dog and the Jonin. Sensei? Is the dog talking? Kakashi looked at Naruto, rolling his visible eye. Yes, Naruto. No time for introductions now. Hello, Pakun. The dog nodded. You needed me for something? We're on a mission, and something came up. Message for the Hokage. 2 prisoners captured by Team 7, a day's walk out on the southeast road. Team 7 is inadequately prepared to deal with them. Suggest immediate pickup by Anbu for conveyance to Konoha. Message ends. Pakun nodded. Got it. Anything else? Kakashi shook his head. No, that's it. Thanks, Pakun. No problem. The dog leapt for the trees, jumping between them several times faster than the ninjas had been walking, and was soon gone. Now, let's see, said Kakashi. We have a couple of missing nin, fairly pathetic missing nin, it's true, but missing nin nonetheless, coming after Tazuna here. He looked straight at the old man, who turned even paler and glanced around as if to escape. You told us that the mission was to guard you from bandits, Tazuna-san. Missing nin of Kirigakure were not in the picture. Tazuna gulped. Well. He trailed off. Kakashi nodded. So you do know something. Very well. Kindly do tell us everything you know about who's after you, Tazuna, or else we will be unable to properly perform our duty. This might have sounded like an innocuous statement of fact in another context. As Kakashi said it, it did not. Team 7 stood around Tazuna as he finished his story. Their reactions were mixed. Naruto was pensive and quiet, for a change, while Sakura looked frightened. Sasuke did not appear to have reacted, and Kakashi's expression was invisible. Kakashi spoke first. It appears that this Gadu person is hiring shinobi to go after you, then. He stared at the bridge builder. That makes this at least a B-rank mission, or higher, depending on who's hired. Not at all the kind of thing that a genin team would be sent on. Tazuna ducked his head. I'm sorry, but we couldn't afford any higher ranked missions, and I need to finish the bridge. Otherwise, Kakashi nodded. Yes, Gato retains control of the Land of Waves, reduces it to his personal fiefdom. Certainly terrible enough, and I understand your motives. The fact remains that this mission is higher level than we are really equipped to handle. Sasuke spoke up, his face impassive. We should continue. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Care to elaborate, Sasuke? It would ill reflect Konoha that we would end a mission in progress simply due to increased difficulties. Kakashi inclined his head at Sasuke. And, if I'm not mistaken, it would ill reflect the Uchiha that a clan member, the last clan member, would end his first mission outside the village. Not that I blame him, I suppose. He spoke again. Any other thoughts? Naruto's face cleared, and he spoke with something approaching his usual exuberance. We should keep going. I mean, it looks like this guy really needs it, and he can't pay for a higher ranked mission. And, it's just not good, like this Gato guy, you know? He shouldn't do that. Kakashi looked at the genin again. Sasuke's expression was his usual half-glower, but it was said in lines that spoke less of anger and more of determination. Naruto was looking stubborn, as usual. Sakura. Well, it appeared that Sakura was frightened. But then, it wouldn't do her any good to turn back on a mission that became too hard. That's not always an option. He nodded. Is that your opinion, then? Sasuke and Naruto both nodded, and, a second later, so did Sakura. Interesting. He looked back at Tazuna. It appears, then, that we're keeping the mission. However, some more precautions are necessary. He was about to continue when Naruto spoke up. Sensei? I was thinking, maybe I could make shadow clones to go ahead of us and see if anyone tries that again? Kakashi looked at him, startled. He wouldn't have expected that sort of idea from Naruto, but then. That's a good idea, Naruto. In fact, how about I show you how to do proper sentry formation around a moving target? Naruto grinned and made a hand sign. The area around them disappeared, first in smoke, then in copies of Naruto. Kakashi sighed. Naruto, first, we only need about 10 to do sentry work. Second, for stealthy sentry formation in a forest. He indicated the green treetops around them. You may want to have your clones wear something other than orange. The travelers sat in a small boat, simple and well used. An outboard engine sat at the back of the boat, but it was not running. Instead, a nervous boatman sculled with an oar over the stern. Naruto had dismissed his sentry clones when they boarded the boat, leaving him feeling oddly exposed. 3 days of constantly having sentry clones out had gotten him used to some general knowledge of their surroundings. Everyone in the boat was quiet. The owner, who Tazuna had gotten to agree to this with a minor bribe and an appeal to patriotism, was obviously frightened. Tazuna was less so, but still nervous. Sasuke was always quiet, Sakura was following his example, and Naruto was sorting through the memories from his many sentry clones. Most of them had simply run through the trees until their shift was up, but still, you saw so much more of the country this way. The boatman spoke up softly. Look, up ahead, there's the bridge. Sure enough, an enormous bridge stretched from far away to a point some half a mile ahead, barely visible in the mist. It cut off suddenly, ending without ceremony, as if it had been sliced off in the middle of the ocean. Wow, Naruto whispered, trying to keep his voice down. That's big. Tazuna-san, did you really build that? Tazuna smiled. Well, I designed it. Obviously I didn't build it myself. And I'm still working on it. Naruto grinned at him. It's really cool. I'm glad you think so. Tazuna chuckled at the blonde boy's enthusiasm. Try to keep it down, said the boatman frantically. If we get seen. Naruto nodded and quieted. The boat slid silently along the line of the bridge, making Naruto feel tiny next to it. After some time, the vessel turned to the side and moved through one of the tunnel-like gaps between the bridge supports. As they left the tunnel, they found themselves in a bay between two spurs of land, both lined with small docks. The boatman slid up alongside one. Here you are. This is as far as I go. Tazuna nodded. Thanks very much. He stepped creakily out of the boat and stretched. Now to my house. It's just a little way, that way. He indicated one of the roads leading away from the thin strip of town around the bay. The travelers set off again. As soon as they had left the town and were once again among the trees, Naruto formed a cross hand seal and made another group of clones. These hanged themselves out of Naruto's orange jumpsuit into more inconspicuous garb, then jumped away into the trees. Tazuna, who had seen this once an hour for the past 3 days, did not blink. They had been walking for perhaps 3 hours when Naruto blinked, then turned to Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei? Something just happened to one of my clones. It didn't see anything, just got dispelled without warning. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. You're sure it didn't trip, or something? Naruto crossed his arms. Come on, Kakashi-sensei, I'm not that clumsy. Kakashi laughed. True enough. His face became serious. In that case, someone killed it. And they're probably coming after us now. Naruto, send out some clones to investigate. Everyone, defensive formation. Naruto nodded and made the cross again. These clones did not bother to disguise themselves, but simply jumped straight away. The 4 shinobi stood close around Tazuna, still moving, but alert and ready to defend. This had been the state of affairs for a minute or so when Naruto received a memory dump. Kakashi-sensei, the clones I sent out didn't find anything. One of them just dispelled themselves to report back. They saw nothing. Then, suddenly, his eyes widened. Sensei. Kakashi was not listening. He had heard something else. Everyone down. He roared suddenly, dropping to the ground. The 3 genin did the same, Sasuke grabbing Tazuna and bringing him down as well. A huge sword spun out of the forest behind them and whipped less than a foot above their heads, passing over them and slamming into a nearby tree blade first. It embedded itself in the trunk with nearly half of its width, almost cutting the tree in two. As the travelers stood again, a man wearing no shirt, only a leather strap for a sword, appeared on the sword hilt, standing above them. Kakashi looked up, taking in the sword, the man, and the headband he wore to one side of his head. The same as the demon brothers' headbands from earlier, the village hidden in the mist, as Naruto recalled. Ah, you would be Momochi Zabuza, of Kirigakure. I assume you are the person who the demon brothers attempted rather ineptly to conceal the existence of? The man, Zabuza, laughed. They spoke? I am not surprised. He finally turned fully around. I see why they failed. Sharingan no Kakashi. I wonder why you are here. He gestured at the genin now surrounding Tazuna. They would explain it. Of course Konoha would place a shinobi like yourself in charge of a team of brats. And no doubt someone thought this mission a good introduction, A good first test, a good, easy beginning? He laughed. Just your bad luck, brats, that it was not. Kakashi shook his head slowly. The demon of the bloody mist. Have you fallen so far, to be taking on assassinations of poor civilians for a master like Gato? I remember when you had principles. Absurdly bloody ones, true, but principles nonetheless. The Kyuubi snorted in Naruto's mind. This one also calls himself demon? I suppose he is more deserving of the title than the others. Naruto firmly shut it out. Zabuza narrowed his eyes, oblivious to the demon fox's disapproval. Gato is rich. He is willing to pay me much money to kill the old man there. I need money. But Gato is nothing but worthless. With a motion too fast to see, he yanked the sword out of the tree and dropped to the ground ahead of them. Naruto looked on, confused. Wait, how did he pull out the sword he was standing on? Zabuza stood with the huge sword across his back, directly between the team and the river across the trail ahead. I am directed to kill the old man behind you. Will you deliver him, or must I destroy you? Kakashi placed one hand on his headband, confusing Naruto. You think you can? Zabuza laughed. You might even be able to kill me, Sharingan no Kakashi. But I don't think that you can prevent me from killing the old man and all 3 of your brats. Kakashi tensed up, then, slowly, almost deliberately, he lifted the headband up, uncovering both eyes for the first time Naruto had ever seen. His eye had a long vertical scar over it, continuing over his eyelid, which suddenly opened. His eye was red, that was all Naruto could see, red, with odd black irregularities. Zabuza laughed. I am honored. The Sharingan already. Well, we'll have to see. Naruto was confused, but glancing to the side he saw that Sasuke was more confused. With good reason, too. How on earth would Kakashi have gotten the Sharingan? That was an Uchiha thing. Zabuza suddenly skipped backwards, standing on the surface of the water. Now shall we put it to the test? Ribbons of chakra spun around him for a moment, kicking up spray from the water on which he stood. Kirigakure no jutsu, he whispered, and the mist closed in. Naruto glanced around in near panic. He could not see. He could not see anything. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow ominous, but he could not see. He could barely see Sasuke standing next to him. Then, that power. He had felt killing intent before, but this was more than he had ever imagined. Kakashi, ahead of them, was an indistinct shadow, impossible to see clearly. Sasuke stood to the side, gripping the handle of a kunai as if it was the rope holding him up above a bottomless pit. There was a pressure on Naruto's mind, almost as if someone was crushing his head, forcing him to admit that he was tiny, worthless, helpless. That his life was not his own. Then, another pressure, a familiar one this time. You see what power is? You can have power. And there was force, an outward force, and red filled his vision. And then Kakashi did something almost explosive, and the mist around them blew away as if in a storm of wind. Naruto forced the red down, as the external pressure of Zabuza's killing intent also subsided. The fox grumbled within him but did not protest. Kakashi spoke without turning around. Don't worry, no harm will come to you. He did not address the remarks. They might just as well have been to Tazuna or the genin, but both took it as reassurance. There was a slight relaxation in the air at the dissipation of the enemy's mist. Then there was a laugh, a long, sincerely amused laugh, seeming to come from all directions. You say you can prevent it? And Zabuza appeared, suddenly, straight in the middle of the formation that the genin had established, his huge sword out and ready to swing, and the swing would have cut through all four of them before they could react. Then Kakashi was there, ducking under the sword's hilt, driving a kunai straight into Zabuza's stomach, as the genin leapt backwards, and Tazuna fell over on his butt. And still Zabuza laughed. Naruto looked at him, incredulous. Kakashi had won, surely. Zabuza was standing there with a kunai lodged in his stomach below the rib cage. Kakashi in front of him. Water was dripping from the wound. Wait, water? As that thought crossed his mind, Zabuza fell apart, dissolved into water, and another one appeared behind Kakashi. Sensei, he shouted, knowing it was too late, hearing Sakura say the same thing, as the new Zabuza swung his gigantic sword around in a wide arc, catching Kakashi in the middle of it, slicing him straight in half. Blood flew everywhere. No, that was water again. Wait, what? Another Kakashi appeared, this time standing behind and to the side of the other Zabuza, holding a kunai to his throat. It's over, he said, almost impassive. Naruto noticed with some frustration that it was almost as impossible to read Kakashi's expressions with both eyes showing as without. He still had that darned mask. Zabuza was still laughing, which made Naruto nervous, but as far as he could tell Zabuza was beaten. Kakashi was standing there, and any motion Zabuza made would not be finished before Kakashi opened up his throat and probably took off his head. So why? Zabuza spoke through his laughs. Indeed, well, are you called Sharingan no Kakashi? You copied my water clone without me noticing in the mist. I must congratulate you, but I'm afraid, he turned his head with a sudden predatory gleam in his eye, that you are a little overconfident. He spun suddenly, bringing up his sword. Just as predicted, Kakashi violently jerked the kunai through his neck, his head flying off, his body dissolving into water. Again, then another Zabuza appeared, again behind Kakashi, and swung his sword. Naruto's warning died on his lips as Kakashi dropped out of the way with astounding speed. The dodge left him vulnerable. Zabuza's sword swung around, stabbed into the ground, and then Zabuza, pivoting on its hilt, spun himself around and kicked Kakashi hard. He flew off, landing in the middle of the river. Zabuza dashed after him, the edge of the water apparently meaning nothing to him. He ran on the water as easily as he ran on land, coming up alongside Kakashi just as he broke the surface of the water. He made a few hand seals, and suddenly the water flowed up out of the river, around Kakashi, forming a perfect sphere with their sensei trapped in the middle of it. There was a few moments of apparent conversation between the two, and then Zabuza raised a hand, keeping, Naruto noticed, the other embedded in the sphere of water. Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. A copy of Zabuza rose out of the water near the shore, stepping onto dry land with an arrogant tread. His copied sword was slung across his back. Kakashi shouted at them, "Run! You have to run! You can't beat him, but he has to stay here to keep me trapped. Run!" Naruto moved forward, almost on instinct. He saw Sasuke doing the same beside. The two glanced at each other, then back at the water clone, grinning. "We can't run," said Sasuke conversationally. "If we go, this guy can probably kill Kakashi-sensei somehow inside that thing, and then he'll come after us and kill us. Only way we can win is to get Kakashi out." The clone, close enough to hear their conversation, laughed. "A masterful analysis. A pity you have no chance." Naruto rubbed his nose thoughtfully. "You know, even when he did the water clone jutsu, the real guy back there didn't move his hand from out of that thing Kakashi's in." Sasuke nodded. "Well, gotta get past this guy first." He indicated the clone. Naruto nodded. "I'll get right on that. Fighting a Jonin formation sound good?" Sasuke snorted. "Wonderfully creative name you've got there." "Sounds good." Naruto grinned widely and crossed his fingers. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clearing filled with clones. Naruto glanced to one side to see that Sasuke had, according to plan, hanged into a copy of Naruto as well. The clones spread out, moving to the edges of the river, making a large semicircle around the water clone of Zabuza. Then they all threw kunai at once. Zabuza's eyes had widened when Naruto made his clones, but he did not move. The kunai, prepared as usual with exploding tags around the handles, made him do so. He jumped straight back onto the water. The majority of the exploding kunai congregated where he had been, and exploded. A few wild throws were deflected by the clone's sword. Then the clones attacked again. This time, Zabuza's clone was forced to leap straight up. As the kunai exploded beneath him, the clones threw at him again, in the same technique that had killed Mizuki and forced Kakashi to resort to a quick substitution. The clone did not bother. He whipped his sword around and stood on it in midair. All the kunai, aimed from below as they were, bounced off, but most of them exploded around that time. The water clone was thrown up in the air several more feet by the explosion, shielded by the giant sword. He fell to the surface of the river and sank for a moment before rising up and standing on the surface. The sword was nowhere to be seen. His face was grim. "Enough," said he. He produced two kunai seemingly from nowhere and charged at the mob of clones. It was Kakashi all over again. None of the clones had the slightest chance against even a clone of Zabuza. Any of them that entered his reach died, and none landed a single blow upon him. The mob, which had been spread out in a semicircle surrounding the clone, gathered around him, hoping to overwhelm him with force of numbers, but they were unsuccessful. Even the huge number of clones Naruto had summoned began to thin out, throwing themselves against the juggernaut. One behind him was making seals. Zabuza did not notice. He was supremely aware of any clone that entered his hand-to-hand range, but those beyond did not concern him. They would only die in their turn. Thus, he was startled, if only momentarily inconvenienced, when all the clones around him lunged at once and grabbed his limbs, and more startled at the voice from behind him. "Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu." A fireball engulfed all the clones, the 12 or so of Naruto holding on as well as the one of Zabuza that was the target. Naruto's clones disappeared immediately, leaving puffs of smoke behind. Zabuza's held out for almost a full 2 seconds in the fire before dissolving into another puddle of water. Sasuke's henge ended as he bent over, panting. Some 5 of Naruto, all that were left of the original mob of clones, gathered round him. The original Zabuza, standing still on the surface of the river by Kakashi's prison, raised his eyebrows. "Impressive, brats." He raised his free hand again. "Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu." Another clone climbed out of the river, standing near the edge. Naruto glanced at Sasuke, releasing his remaining clones. "That got us absolutely nowhere, didn't it?" "So it seems." Sasuke had recovered a little, and was standing straight. Naruto did not seem to have expended any energy at all. Zabuza's new clone laughed. "An impressive showing. You caught me by surprise. It won't do you any good, though. You can't keep up attacks of that magnitude for as long as I can keep up making water clones." Naruto glanced sideways at Sasuke. "Let's find out." He crossed his fingers again, making another, though smaller, mob of clones. They all charged at Zabuza's water clone nearby. Sasuke was the only one to notice the big shuriken one of them had tossed him as it attacked. He looked it over for a moment, then raised an eyebrow. The clones had all attacked Zabuza at once. As was more or less predictable, without one throwing heavy jutsus around, they did nothing at all. A single swipe of the big sword dispelled most of them and sent the remainder skidding away, dispersing with muted pops as they went. Sasuke put the dots together quickly. By this time he had already gotten another shuriken from his pack. He leapt into the air, one of the two unfolded in his hand, the other behind him. Take this, then. A shuriken whirled and flew towards Zabuza, straight past the clone, targeting the real one still holding Kakashi prisoner. By the time Sasuke landed, his hands were empty. Zabuza watched the incoming shuriken without any particular consternation. It was a formidable weapon, spinning at a high rate of speed, closing on him quickly, so fast that his eyes could not track its rotation. But if he moved just so, and grabbed it here, the shuriken stopped dead, abruptly, and Zabuza swung it out to one side to cancel its forward momentum. He grinned at the brats. Good try, but he stopped. Another shuriken had been behind the first. This one was close, too close to grab, and his hand was out of place. It moved towards him as if in slow motion, and, with a sudden, convulsive effort, he leapt, not a leap as any self-respecting ninja would practice, but a desperate yanking of his lower body out of the way. His hand remained in the water prison, maintaining it, as he folded the rest of him up into a tiny space below his head. The shuriken passed straight underneath him, harmless, and he returned to position with a sigh of relief. An even better try. I might even acknowledge you as worth fighting. You still have no. He cut himself off, again, at the sound of a henge behind him. He looked around frantically to see that the shuriken had, in fact, been a loud, annoying, blonde brat with a kunai in his hand, who threw it hard at his shoulder with a cry of, "Take this." Zabuza was faced with a choice. He could remove his hand from the water prison and dodge the kunai, which would leave him unharmed but fighting a pissed-off Sharingan no Kakashi. Or, he could take the shot, which was quite well aimed, Zabuza admitted with grudging respect, at the big, important muscles in his shoulder. The kunai would cripple his arm, and there was no way he would be able to maintain the water prison through that. That option would leave him quite emphatically harmed, and also fighting a pissed-off Sharingan no Kakashi. With one arm, Zabuza chose the former. Sasuke glanced between his teacher and the downed form of Zabuza at the base of the tree in front of him. The power of the Sharingan was awe-inspiring. Kakashi had the full three-tomo form, Sasuke had noticed, and his mastery of it, at least, that either had ever shown Sasuke, was at least as great as his father's had been. Of course, it was nothing on Itachi's. That thought would have thrown him into depression, again, if there had not been important things happening to keep him distracted. Kakashi was threatening Zabuza with death. Routine enough, Sasuke supposed, and he was pissed off enough at Zabuza not to particularly care. He had taken a few hits from that clone when hanged into Naruto, and they had hurt. Zabuza was looking up, frightened. Kakashi was about to put his own sword through his neck. Zabuza was falling over, apparently dead, of three senbons suddenly protruding from his throat. What? Kakashi looked up, alert again, to see a shinobi in an odd, porcelain mask standing on a tree branch. Sasuke looked at him? Her? Impossible to tell, as closely as he could, but could not discern anything that was not obvious. I need my Sharingan. The ninja was jumping down to the ground, approaching Zabuza's body. The ninja was saying something about being from Kirigakure and hunting down Zabuza as a traitor. The ninja was picking up Zabuza's body over her shoulder. They're strong. I could probably do that, but it'd be kind of hard. The ninja was walking some distance away. The ninja disappeared, probably with a shunshin. Kakashi looked around, seemingly caught off balance. Sasuke walked over to him. The dobi had crawled out of the river where he had landed from his henge stunt and walked over as well. Both Kakashi and the dobi were soaking wet, but that was trivial. Kakashi looked at Sasuke. Listen, I've overused this Sharingan. I'm going to collapse from chakra exhaustion pretty soon now. Get Tazuna home. Get me there. I'll just need to rest. You're in charge until I wake up. The dobi did not comment. Sasuke would have expected him to complain bitterly about that, but apparently he was too high on his earlier triumph to do so. Well, let him be. It had been impressive. Kakashi reached up and pulled his Hite Ite down over his Sharingan, concealing it again. Then his visible eye rolled up in his head and he collapsed. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.